on who is investing in epilepsy and CNS therapy research and innovation today, funding beyond angels, grants, and awards. We are fortunate to have as our moderator for our panel Casey Lynch, who is the managing director of NeuroInsights. She is also the author of their excellent annual neuro industry report and of their monthly Neurotech Insights publication. She's also the CEO of Cortexyme, wearing multiple hats. She has a MS in neuroscience, and I learned today that she actually trained in Dan Lowenstein's lab. So we're delighted to have Casey with us. On the panel, we're going to have Greg Simon, a longtime friend, innovator, and great person. He's the CEO of Poliwogg, with whom the Epilepsy Foundation has formed an important new partnership that you'll hear more about. Poliwogg is an innovative financial firm transforming the healthcare industry and helping to finance some of our smaller companies. He has a rich resume, but I will highlight his role as the founding president of Faster Cures, which is a center of the Milken Institute. We also have with us today Dr. Manuel Lopez, who is the vice president at Bay City Capital, specializes in CNS. He is also a scientific liaison for the Pritzker Neuropsychiatric Disorders Research Consortium. Also with us is Dr. Sigrid Van Bladel, who is a venture partner at Aberdare Ventures. We have Dr. Adam Bristol, who is the vice president at Aquila Partners, an investor, an investment firm. He also serves as a startup mentor for the NIH Commercial Assistance Program and is a business advisor to the Michael J. Fox Therapeutic Development Initiative. And finally, we have Sam Wu, who is an M.D. PhD and managing director of MedImmune Ventures, had experience at SF Life Sciences before, with broad experience in biopharmaceuticals and platform companies, as well as past work at McKinsey & Company. We have two of our panelists. Sigrid also, I think, spent time earlier in her career at McKinsey. So with that, I will turn it over to Casey.
Thank you, Warren and Roger, for inviting me to moderate again. This is always a great conference. Just to set the stage, I thought I'd share a little bit of NeuroInsights data on venture investment from last year. We don't have the semi-annual numbers put together yet, but investment in neuroscience, including pharmaceuticals, devices, and cell therapy companies and diagnostics, was up last year 11.7% to $1.44 billion. That's really great compared to overall life science investing, which was down 2%. The gains were mostly due to the pharmaceutical sector, which was up 30% alone, over 103 deals. This is a lot due, obviously, to the IPO window being very open and active, as well as the M&A. In devices, the investment was down a little bit last year to $320 million, over 35 deals. That's a lot due to a really great year that happened in 2012 for neuro devices. There was so much investment that it was bound to come down a little bit. And finally, in neurodiagnostics, it's always usually sort of low and steady, $62 million invested over 14 deals. So with that, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves a little bit more, if there's anything they'd like to add to Warren's introduction about your fund, and also what's your interest in neuroscience and epilepsy in particular, why you're here today.
Sure. I'll start. I'm Adam Bristol, and I'm with Aquila Capital. We're a life science investment fund here in San Francisco. My personal background is actually in neuroscience, and I did my PhD and postdoc in the endogenous cannabinoid system. I wasn't specifically studying epilepsy, but certainly the CB1 receptors in neuropathology and neurophysiology, specifically with the cerebellum. And my investment fund, we really cut across therapeutic areas. We do some things in CNS. We also do a lot in oncology and autoimmune and inflammation. We're very much sort of fundamental due diligence, long-term buy and hold investors, primarily in the public markets. And we can describe how the public markets are important even for entrepreneurs and private companies, because the robust public markets can set the stage for the capital markets and for private companies as well.
Hi, my name is Manuel Lopez-Figueroa. I also have a PhD in neuroscience years ago. And I wear two hats. I wear a hat of venture philanthropy. I work for a foundation that is called the Pritzker Neuropsychiatric Disorders Research Foundation, which is funding a consortium of universities, including some in the Bay Area, like Stanford, but also UC Irvine, Cornell, Michigan, and Hudson Alpha. The goal is to identify novel therapies and diagnostics for psychiatric disorders, bipolar, major depression, and schizophrenia. Therefore, some of the comorbidities with epilepsy. And we have been very lucky that over the last 13 years of funding, we have identified novel targets for depression. And through the funding of the Pritzker family, we will be hopefully moving some of these towards the clinic this year. So we have been very enlightening in that regard. These are multidisciplinary groups from basic science all the way to the clinic. And I'm also wearing the hat of venture capital. I work for Bay City Capital, a company that has been around since '97. We have about 1.6 billion under management. We have invested in over 100 companies in the life sciences space, going from biopharmaceuticals, medical devices, diagnostics. And we cover the whole spectrum. We go from very early stage all the way to traditional VC investments, but also pipes. We invest in public markets, and we also do different kind of transactions. The CNS space is one that obviously is close to the heart, and about, I would say, at least 10 companies that we have invested. Some of them, we have people represented. Next Wave, some of the members of Next Wave are here. But also we have done investments in companies like Civitas recently, whereby the money that the Michael J. Fox had put into it put a stamp of approval, or a stamp of a knowledge of the quality of the technologies that we are investing in.
Great. My name is Sigrid Van Bladel, and I'm a venture partner at Aberdare Ventures. And I'm maybe more of a generalist in that my PhD is only in molecular biology. So I'm not a brainiac to the degree you guys are.
I'm sure you are.
I joined Aberdare as a venture partner in 2011. Before that, I thought I had retired, but apparently not. But I had worked at NEA for 18 years as a partner. NEA is a very large firm. Aberdare is more of a small, specialized firm focusing on healthcare investing. And NEA is more generalist, very large. And at NEA, in those 18 years, made a number of investments in a variety of medical fields, but maybe most notably NeuroPace, which was a company I was on the board on for 11 years. And also Excel Pharmaceuticals, which was the maker of the Diastat, which was the rectal benzodiazepine product for rescue medicine for seizures. And they also had the retigabine asset, which then that company got bought up by Valiant. We also invested in Alexa, which now has a product with the Staccato technology. And NEA also invested in Supernus, which has recently had the sustained release topiramate approved. My other investments were in cardiovascular field. I was on 15 plus boards over that time period, and some big returns and some pretty spectacular misses too, but that would take up too much time. So I'm from Belgium originally, came to the States to do an MBA. My PhD was at the University of Ghent, MBA at Stanford, and then picked up by NEA.
Hi, I'm Greg Simon. Can you all see us over there, or hear us over there? Don't know what you did wrong to go over there, but we'll let you back here.
Maybe it's us.
So, yeah, maybe it's us. So I'm always the answer to the Miller analogy test of which one of these people don't fit. Since I have an American history degree from the University of Arkansas. But I don't mean to drop names. My interest in epilepsy was when I started working with Mike Milken and met Warren Lammert. and many of the other brave and inspiring families that Warren introduced me to over the years. And when I started Faster Cures, I'm sitting alone by myself, having left my own business to do something Mike Milken thought was a great idea. And I said, how am I going to do this? And I realized I didn't have to do it. There were all kinds of people who were already doing it, changing the way we do research. I just had to find out who they were. And they were the people who were taking foundations into a new direction. And it was all about culture. When we had our first meeting with a number of foundations from a variety of diseases, no matter what the disease was, the biggest obstacle was not the science, it was the culture of the way we do science. So now at Poliwogg, I'm focused on the culture of the way we do finance. Because for the last 50 years, finance, private company finance in particular, venture finance, has been the playground of the very wealthy, and people who had access to people who had access to people. So what I call the Barbra Streisand principle. And the problem with that is that you're not going to solve any of our problems in epilepsy, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, et cetera, by finding a few people or a few funds that have millions of dollars to put into it. You're going to solve it by finding thousands of people, millions of people who have thousands of dollars to put into it, because they realize that the risk of losing their money in the investment is less than the risk of keeping the disease the way it is now. So fortunately, otherwise I'd be out of a job, your government passed a law that makes the democratization of venture capital possible. And you couple that with social media and online investing that makes it very easy to get information to people, and the law that allows me to tell you that I'm raising money for a private company in public, which a year ago would have been illegal. So now you have the ability to communicate what you're doing in raising money in private companies, small companies. You have the ability to reach people through social media, and you have people who are willing to take a chance on, who've never had the opportunity to invest their money in the future of a disease that affects their lives because it was too expensive and too elitist for you to get into the funds that were making the big investments. And those funds are necessary, but they should not go away. But the future is going to be millions of people making choices and spending thousands of dollars each. And that's what Poliwogg helps facilitate.
Fascinating. So my name's Sam Wu. Very, very interesting, by the way.
Thank you.
I didn't know that's what you guys did. I always feel guilty since I live in Silicon Valley if I don't know what's going on, even though I'm not in the tech sector. But I'm actually not on the program. I'm crashing this panel at the invitation of, I guess it must be Warren. But I'm a managing director with MedImmune Ventures. We are the corporate venture capital arm of AstraZeneca. So if anything, I represent that end of the spectrum that's going to come up with the hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for the last push, right? The pivotal studies that get drugs to approval. I think Warren mentioned my background. I've been in venture capital for 12 years, only got into this current firm about 3.5 years ago. Have a broad experience base in terms of investing in both medical devices as well as therapeutics in almost every therapeutic area. In terms of what we do for AstraZeneca, we're kind of we actually invest with a focus on financial returns. We don't necessarily invest on strategy, but we call it a window into early stage innovation for our corporate parent. And certainly, epilepsy, neuroscience is one of the 5 major therapeutic areas for AstraZeneca.
Great, thanks. So focusing on epilepsy, it's such a heterogeneous disorder. So we have sporadic forms, genetic forms, childhood, orphan, elderly. It seems like in terms of trial design, in terms of companies bringing drugs, a lot of people are focusing on orphan disorders now, which present some benefits. How do you view this segmentation of the patient population? I'm going to start with Sigrid. Okay.
Well, part of the problem with doing target is really in a targeted way segmenting the population. It's difficult to do when you have a disease. It's easier to do when you have, say, a cancer where you can do molecular typing and you can really rule out certain molecular markers and really start honing your therapies to that. We don't really have the luxury of that in epilepsy, from what I understand, yet, or not enough to do that. So it's very difficult to do an intelligent triage and selection based on that. However, one area where you certainly can is looking at whether you have a more generalized disease or a disease in foci. If you have an epilepsy that has one or two foci, say, in their hippocampal, then a patient like that could very much benefit from a more site-specific therapy, such as an implantable device, like the RNS, to really help them bypass the side effects of a lot of these medications, because a lot of these meds don't belong in your frontal lobe, particularly if you have a focal onset. You don't want to be messing with a person's alertness and with a patient's sense of balance and things like that. So triaging based on focal or not is certainly a very meaningful way, I believe.
Manuel, do you want to comment on, is a trial that's going to take all comers, is that going to be a problem, do you think, in the readouts? Or?
Let me follow up on the first question, because I think that actually there was an article that just was published by AstraZeneca, by members of AstraZeneca in Nature Biotech. It talks about the 5, actually 6 R's on drug discovery. And is Mani Pengalos, which is the head of CNS, is one of the last author in that paper. I will highly encourage you guys to read it.
He's actually the head of R&D. Head of R&D.
Yeah. So one of the R's is the right target population, and the target population can be defined genetically. And I think that in the case of epilepsy, we have seen today, but over the last 2 days of this conference, how we're starting to have a better understanding of the genetics. We have novel targets that allow us to identify novel populations, and therefore you can start targeting the population that you can include in your clinical trials, but hopefully also the ones who will respond to your particular treatment. And I think that helps on, in particular in CNS, where we know that there is a high placebo effect. Hopefully try to ameliorate that placebo effect by assuring that that's the population that is going to respond, but also tailoring treatments to avoid, in some cases, the unnecessary adverse events or the adverse events that come with certain treatments. So I think that we're moving in that direction, whether it's in epilepsy or even in other indications that are, obviously oncology is leading the trend, but I think that is now being applied to CNS.
In the public markets, genetic segmentation and orphan disorders is very hot right now, and we're seeing a lot of activity, for example, in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, where the FDA seems to take action, and then even it seems like the patient groups may even be having an impact, and we can't quite tell what's happening yet, but what's your perception on the public markets of how this is playing out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think there's probably a couple topics embedded there. The first is that the public markets are very fallible. They are catalyst-driven. They are momentum-driven. They are sentiment-driven. And so, but some of the fundamental concepts that the public markets have certainly latched onto are orphan drug designations because of the things that come along with it. There's a perception that you can have an expedited development pathway. There's a perception that you can have premium pricing, and pricing that's going to be resistant to certain genericization or pushback on pricing, and so you can sustain that dominant market position for a long time. Certainly orphan drug designation can provide that for you. And then I would also say, too, that there's a free associating, but in terms of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, it is a great example of where patient advocacy groups have played a very important role on multiple fronts. They have played a role in patient registries. They have provided funding in certain cases. They have been advocates in front of the FDA, looking to enhance and hone the clinical trial design. What are the important patient-reported outcomes? I think, getting back to some of this patient stratification we were talking earlier, just in preparation for this meeting, I was kind of just thinking on a high level, in the asthma field, to the extent that I understand it, the asthma is defined by treatment failures. You are inhaled corticosteroids failure, then you fail this, then you fail that, and so that's kind of what defines the patient. It seems, from my, being pretty far removed, but epilepsy, it seems like it's a little bit like that. That is, often these patients are recalcitrant, and so they're almost defined by what they don't respond to. That's not really getting at the biological mechanism. And so when I looked at a few pivotal trials recently, the patient stratifications, at least in terms of post hoc predefined analyses, were on age, number of AEDs, seizure frequency at the time of enrollment. Again, not speaking to mechanism at all. And so I think that, I'm kind of conflating two things, but and patient advocacy groups can have a huge impact in driving the clinical science, as well as marshaling resources towards improving clinical drug discovery and development success. But I think the translational biology's got to catch up too. The public markets will recognize all of this. They really will. But I think that if you look at other areas of drug development, like in oncology or in inflammation, where some of the mechanistic and objective clinical endpoints are there, sometimes they tend to latch onto those. But you can see tremendous successes if you have positive clinical results in CNS. And we could talk about a number of examples more recently. But the public markets will recognize it. But I think there's some inherent challenges in this area that need to be addressed.
Sam, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, from the corporate, and particularly from the pharmaceutical corporation perspective, right? There's quite a bit of focus, and I can definitely speak for AstraZeneca on this, on being able to identify subsets of populations that are more likely to respond to specific therapies, and this is across the board. I mean, going back to asthma, right? AstraZeneca probably has one of the leading pipelines, if not the leading pipeline in respiratory right now, and particularly in asthma. They have multiple compounds that are targeted for very specific patient subsets, not defined by what drugs they failed, but by very specific biomarkers, right? And in some cases, very specific to the antibodies that are hitting particular targets. I honestly see that this is the path forward, right? What we have to do with epilepsy is understand a lot better, what are the mechanisms, what are the underlying causes, and what biomarkers can we use that will help us differentiate patients in a way that's meaningful, that will really have a relationship to the drugs that we're developing to treat the disease.
The one thing I would just want to add while I'm thinking about it is that reformulations and sort of incremental improvements that may improve patient compliance or convenience, those have done really well in recent years too, and I can give you a whole basket of publicly traded companies which have done extremely well because of some type of product offering. So while I would love to have the grand vision of sort of better molecularly defined or biologically defined treatments, I think there's also room in the public markets will recognize some of these more incremental improvements, for lack of a better term.
And that's a great lead-in. Let's talk about reformulations a little bit. And Greg, I'm not forgetting about you.
No, that's okay.
Poliwogg and crowdfunding, certainly important. How do you view, we heard Rusty Katz previously at the FDA stand up and talk about head-to-head comparisons and reformulations. While incremental improvements are going to face regulatory and reimbursement hurdles to prove that they're really better than what's out there. So, Manuel, how do you view investing in those kinds of opportunities?
I have a bias because we have done very well investing in companies that are reformulations. We just, the last investment was Civitas, which is one of the oldest drugs, L-DOPA, which the company is reformulating, but also putting in a device that allows for an early onset of action and to treat what is a significant problem on the Parkinson population, which is the off effect. Another exit that we're proud of is NextWave, which is also another reformulation for ADHD. And we have done several investments that we felt that the market opportunity, again, you have to look at what are you doing, what is it the market that you're trying to achieve, and what is the unmet need in order to do something that by others may be as something that is not innovative, but we felt that it was a right investment.
And NextWave was a liquid formulation of current ADD medicine that was bought for $500 million by Pfizer? So
700.
700.
Sorry. It's a couple of zeros.
Right, so that's huge. And they did have to get to approval before they were bought. So that's
Well, it was a structured deal, but yeah.
okay. Good to know. Sigrid.
But, and drug delivery was, particularly in the 80s and 90s, that was the golden ticket, right? You just reformulate, you patent extension, and a lot of money was made and lot of our firms, and Supernus is, was an NEA company. But I think in this day and age, you have to ask yourself, who's really benefiting here? Because if it's the pharma company or the investor benefiting, but the patient is only marginally benefiting, it's not sustainable. Our healthcare system we have such inflation in our spending. That's not where we should be making money. That's not where money should be made. It should be in making significant impact on outcomes or saving significantly on these huge expenses that are being made now. So Aberdare actually took a stance in their most recent fund against what we called premium priced, marginally better products. We just would not invest in them. That's because our healthcare system cannot support it. It's radical, but I mean, I fully embrace it myself.
I'm in complete agreement, and certainly, traditionally pharma companies prefer to see the novel mechanism and a big impact drug. As an investor, and as an early stage investor, I prefer to invest in something that I think will have a big impact and therefore a big return, as opposed to investing in something that will have a smaller impact, and I'll have to take all the way to approval before I can get to my exit.
It's funny, we often think, and I'd be curious from the other panelists, we tend to think risk for our drug development companies is kind of coming in 4 buckets. It's financial risk, it's clinical or technical risk, regulatory risk, and then commercial risk. And so on the reformulation or drug delivery side, you may think, and it's probably true in most cases, that the technical risk is going to be lower than a novel first-in-class agent. But then the commercial risk is probably going to be higher, and then maybe even getting higher in the future. There's no doubt that, especially if you're taking a 505(b)(2) strategy where maybe almost like a bioequivalence is really what's getting you approved, then it's convincing the payer, convincing the prescriber that there's something demonstrably different. I think when I look at companies like a NextWave and others, I think what's most impressive about NextWave, again, I don't know this as well as you do, Manuel, but the number of almost, again, I'm on thin ice here, but it seemed to me from the outsider's perspective that they did a lot of studies that maybe not necessarily needed for FDA approval, but were important almost kind of marketing studies, that are studies that could demonstrate its value versus other products on the market. Is that a fair assessment or no?
I think that all the elements that you mentioned before were put together in the analysis of what the opportunity was and what the requirements were, or what the questions were addressed by means of the studies. So for instance, I think that you make a very important point, which is the payer's perspective.
Sure.
I mean, you have to make a very good case that any drug that you put into development is going to be differentiating enough with a standard of care. And in many cases, standard of care with genericization have a great impact on the amount of money that you need to develop those technologies. And therefore, if you were a pharma company, you can do a lot of clinical trials to some extent to answer more questions. With the venture capital commitments, you may have to be limited yourself to the questions that are critical. So I think we answer. Obviously, the product was approved, so I think we answered those payers.
Absolutely.
So, Greg, at Poliwogg, you have 2 epilepsy companies, as I understand it, on deck. One which would be available in 2 weeks?
Probably by the end of the month.
By the end of the month, and then the other to follow. What kind of diligence, what do companies need to, what requirements do they need to meet to be listed? What kind of diligence do you do in order to include a company on Poliwogg?
Right. So Poliwogg is not a venture fund. So let's start there. So if you're a venture fund, you're using other people's money. And so, companies are from Venus and money is from Mars. Think of it that way. Companies are aspirational, they have vision, and then they meet people who are very hard-nosed, who say, no, this won't work, this won't. So when a venture fund has to do that because they're using other people's money and they only have so much of it. So if they saw 5 epilepsy companies in a given area and they thought that they had to pick one, they'll pick one. Our goal is that if we see 5 epilepsy companies that all have promise, we would put them all on our platform and let the investors choose the ones they think are the best for them. So how do we choose? So we do 2 things. We look first, is this company dealing with the problem that there's a crowd that's interested in dealing with it? Yes, in the case of epilepsy. Now, there are lots of other diseases where people are still dealing, especially in the neurosciences, where people are still testing peptides in rats. It's hard to get a crowd to want to follow that. That's what seed funding is for. It's what NIH funding is for. Second question we ask is a big question of, is this company investable? Are they doing something that would make a difference? Is there an addressable market? Is the money they're raising taking them to a milestone? Is the team appropriate? Do they have the right kind of board? Do they have the right kind of science? And has it been tried so many times we know it can't work? Or is this a crazy idea that might work? The problem isn't that we're funding too many companies. You know, we hear a lot of times venture funders particularly will say we're funding too many companies because their failure rate is enormous. Well, that's not how it works. If you've got a low success rate, you need to have more tries, right? If you're a baseball player and you're in a slump, you do not get better sitting on the bench. You want more at-bats. So what we're trying to do in the space where companies need $2 to $10 million, not the VC amounts where they need 20 to 50. We're trying to get people who have been funded by foundations primarily, foundations that have a rigorous scientific and business analysis process like the Epilepsy Foundation. We then ask them to help us identify the companies they have given money to that they think offer the best promise. As broker-dealers, we have to do our own diligence. We don't just take them and post them. And then we look at those questions that I just asked. And for instance, in the muscular dystrophy space, we've looked at several companies, and we might want to help fund them all. A friend of mine who has one said, but I don't want to be one of 5 companies on your site. I want to be the only muscular dystrophy company on your site. And I said, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. We're trying to find as many shots on goal that are worth taking, not trying to pick winners, because nobody knows the winners. Nobody knows the winners. So at the end of the day, we're trying to give more people an opportunity to see more companies that need to get to proof of concept to get through what has been so badly named and appropriately named the Valley of Death. Nobody wants to invest in the Valley of Death, so we're trying to build the Bridge of Life to go over the Valley of Death by giving people a chance. Because the companies that fail for lack of money, we have no idea if their idea would work. NIH gives $30 billion a year to 300,000 people. If only 1% have a great idea for a company, that's 3,000 companies a year. Last year, venture capital funded 474 biotherapeutic companies. And if you scratch them, they'll say, well, all the good companies got funded. No, all the companies they could afford to fund got funded. But they're using money from 3% of the 9 million accredited investors in America who are allowed to invest in private companies. We're focused on the other 97%.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about devices, and then I'm going to go to audience questions. So get your questions ready. In the device area, we're finally seeing some signs of life from the device division at the FDA. NeuroPace got approval, yay. I noticed, however, that Medtronic was still giving sort of vague, we're still working with the FDA on their DBS device. So from an investor perspective, how do you view device investment currently? Unfortunately, for some reason, the devices aren't as hot on they're not doing the IPOs like the pharma area, and it's unfortunate, but that doesn't mean it's not a great time to invest for the IPO that could happen 5 years from now. Sigrid.
An advantage of having started in the business in the last millennium, many years ago, is that comment keeps popping up.
Yeah.
Where are the medical device IPOs? Yet money is being made in medical devices. I mean, for a while even, why is healthcare even worth investing? I remember that very clearly in 2000. And I was the only person at NEA doing healthcare investing, including NeuroPace. And so these cycles of skepticism and nervousness, they happen all the time. What may be happening in devices is that these companies get acquired before they have before an IPO is really seriously contemplated. So there's a huge variety of potential acquirers. It's not just the big 3 or big 4. I mean, you have companies left and right, making some unexpected acquisitions, So, or even device companies, like take Conceptus last year getting acquired by a pharmaceutical company. So I don't think, my perception is that investors aren't necessarily deterred by the lack of exit options in devices. I think there's maybe a trend towards being cautious just because of the time it is tending to take to get through the FDA, and and the back and forth with the FDA can take years. And so it's really, as an investor, you have to think carefully about the timeline, the money that it's going to take, and add a big fudge factor in there. And then be very disciplined about how aggressively you invest, because you do not want to get too aggressive up front, run out of money, and then not have enough reserves. And then in round 5 or 6 of financings, because that's how these deals go right now, you may end up being wiped out by a new investor. So it shifts how you spend your coins, and you just kind of think very carefully, and you go in with your eyes wide open that reimbursement may take longer than you think, and the FDA might throw some ridiculous hurdles at you.
I may add that we have seen a trend in the last years where going through the EU, it actually makes more sense because of the regulatory agencies are less stringent. Payers are willing to pay in many cases, and you get traction in the market. And actually, if you have a company that have some traction in Europe, please come and talk to me, because we have an interest in particular medical device companies that follow in that trend. Nevertheless, I mean, as we know, the FDA continues to be hard in many regards, and payers also is not as trivial in the US as it could be in Europe. We are lucky to have an investment in a company like Neuro, which is a pain medical device, and going to your question about public markets, I mean, I think that there are other companies that may come up with the windows that we have seen in the last year and a half as medical device companies going public.
And this point that Sigrid brought up of the pharma companies, I know many who are definitely keeping an eye on the device area, especially the non-invasive devices, including GSK with their new fund. But MedImmune, you said you do device investments, and what's your?
So we have been in the device space for the last few years since I came on board, actually. The rationale actually had to do more with our strategy than because the corporate parent had any interest in medical devices. Our approach was to be financial investors that would be good partners to other leading venture firms, and we were willing to do that by making good financial investments in almost any space where we had expertise. I think, to speak for AstraZeneca right now, they're very much focused on their pharmaceutical business. They're very much focused on their core therapeutic areas. So, I won't let anyone start believing that AstraZeneca is going to get into medical devices all of a sudden.
Good. So, audience.
Can I one follow up on this point though? Like, Sigrid, I'm curious because I live in the therapeutics world. What's a blockbuster device do in terms of revenues? Because one thing that I always see would kind of buttresses the pharmaceutical side and all the IPOs is the lottery-like home run potential of a big drug. And I've often wondered if other areas in life sciences could necessarily match that. And so then that kind of changes your thinking about what the value proposition is and just what the,
Well, if you go, depending how far back you go in time,
Sure.
I mean, stents.
Oh, sure.
Billions and billions.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Pacemakers.
Yeah.
Frank was the CEO of Ventritex.
Sure. Yeah, that's a
But
good
then you have, and sometimes the data is buried because the company gets acquired, they're showing nice sales traction and they get gobbled up and you don't
Right.
really know what the
Yeah,
sales are
true,
and they're
true.
buried.
I've often thought of it, that the value creation in devices is slightly different than the trajectory of a drug development company. So drug development has a very long, protracted, expensive period of presumably risk reduction and value creation over clinical development. Similarly, devices have that too, but for them, sometimes it's an engineering problem. It's maybe more of an EPS story as they're behind the pavement, kind of post-approval. So the growth is a little more organic, where you can have explosive value creation in in any market, private or publics with a therapeutic, if you have compelling clinical data. And so I'm just wondering, I'm just kind of thinking it through because I hadn't really thought about necessarily whether or not boom-bust cycles and IPO windows device would necessarily track or be covariant with the IPO windows for therapeutics companies.
They don't always, yeah.
They don't always,
No.
yeah.
I think the other question maybe to ask you, Adam, is public investors are willing to buy into a pre-approval, post-phase
Yes.
2 drug.
Yeah.
They will not buy into a pre-approval. In fact,
Yeah.
mostly they won't even buy into a pre-revenue stage.
Yeah. Good point.
Medical device
Yeah.
company. The question is why, right? And I know
Yeah.
part of it, since I invested in this, I know part of the reason we don't, we look at it this way is because, well, we know that the acquirers don't act until you've got $20 or $30 million in revenue in
Right.
the device space, which is
Right,
very
right.
different from what happens in the pharma space.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I was going to say, why is that? Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, clearly in terms of what are the ultimate customers looking for, I mean, clearly drug companies, device companies are developing products for patients, but very few, certainly in the therapeutics world, they're going to grow up and market their own drugs. I mean, some
Right.
do, but generally their customers are the pharma companies. And, pharma is often looking for compelling assets at all stages of development. What really
Right.
drives deal value in my mind is not necessarily stage of development, but is a competitive dynamic. It's something that could be really breakthrough about it. It may be very different in the device side, which then is reading through to the investor behavior as well in
Right.
terms of what they're looking for.
And
their
so
metrics
therefore
of
we don't
value.
see the IPOs because the companies
Yeah.
aren't getting to that stage.
To the inflection point
to
where they
have that
investor
IPO.
appetite. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, audience questions? Lauren, do you have a question?
Hide behind the pillar to ask.
So we can't throw anything at them.
I don't know if I can move the microphone to see it. There we go. Most of you. I just wanted to ask, make a further comment about our partnership with Poliwogg and ask a question about that. We, the Epilepsy Foundation, have actually made an investment in Poliwogg as a platform to try to help some of the smaller companies and projects that we funded. And we funded in total 60 now, as Rogers mentioned, of about the 120 new therapies in the pipeline, most of which are at very early stages. But for those that are in their early stages that have often received funding through grants, friends and family, generally less than $1 million in outside capital, we are finding it difficult for those companies often to get a bite from venture. Some of them do, of course. And we thought that this platform could help us move sort of at least into the clinic, in some cases into early proof of principle, at which point we might be able to secure funding from more traditional institutional sources. The Alpha One Foundation made a similar investment to try to develop the platform, and I know Greg is working with other disease organizations to try to bring them into the platform. But I'd just be curious for your feedback about how this could fit into the ecosystem of new company finance and venture fund investments.
So there are two different ways that it fits together. One, as I mentioned, is the raising money for individual companies on the platform with the ability to reach through the foundation to donors, to people who care, to people who visit the website, people who get the newsletter, people who talk to other people, none of which was possible literally last August, and now it is. So the ability of people who are in a group to communicate with each other, to let people know that there's an investment opportunity that's relatively modest compared to what investment used to be before the private companies were allowed to have more investors and still be private, is one way we do it. There's a second way I didn't mention, which is in addition to the private company fundraising, we are creating public venture funds. Private venture funds, you generally need $1 million to get into a private venture fund. But we're creating publicly traded, registered funds that will cost people $5,000 to invest in, that will invest in the verticals of healthcare that people care about. People don't care about big cap stocks or small cap biotech. What they care about is epilepsy, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, et cetera. So our first fund, which is registered at the SEC, and we're currently putting the underwriters together, will be a $100 to $200 million fund to invest in regenerative medicine and stem cell therapy companies, both private and small public companies. And that has an independent manager. We pick the manager, we raise the money, and then they invest. And by law, they're required to only own so much of a company. So by law, they have to co-invest. So that already has led us to a lot of relationships with firms that would never have invested in some opportunities unless they could co-invest. And now we bring a lot more money to that space. The second fund will be in health information technology, and the third fund will be in neurodegenerative diseases, a wide swath of those. And there will be other funds in cardio and cancer, et cetera. But the point is, we have to be able to take these small companies and seed them to the next level, and do that in a way that we have 40 or 50 shots on goal, like in some of our funds. Now you might ask, how is that really going to help? How is that really going to benefit epilepsy and benefit an investor? Well, 7 years ago, if I had told you I think this Facebook thing might be real, and they're going to have a huge platform, and there's no way they can build everything they have to put on that platform. They're going to have to buy some stuff. So if 7 years ago I had put a fund together like the one I just described, and we'd gone out and invested in 50 small companies that we thought Facebook would like, and one of them was Instagram, and one of them was WhatsApp, you'd be very happy today. Now, if I had told you 7 years ago that I was investing in a small company that allows you to text people with pictures and it's going to be worth $19 billion in 7 years, you would have thought I was crazy. But today, if I tell you I'm investing in 40 stem cell companies, and I only need a handful to make a difference, because pharma can't build all those companies, they have to buy those companies. And when a company makes a difference, they will get bought and they will make a big difference. The problem is how we spread it out so that we can get more things funded at the bottom level of the pyramid. The partnership with foundations gives us the benefit of your knowledge and gives you the benefit of our financial platform so that we can bring money to good ideas. That's what, at the end of the day, it's what it's all about. And not always a lot of money. It can be $1 million. It can be $500,000. Because sometimes it's all someone needs in conjunction with other money to get where they're going.
Well, first of all, I would like to applaud you as a person, because what you have done here is very unique. I mean, you have been able to bring to the table over the years people from all the members of the ecosystem, starting from all kind of sources of funding, and that's not trivial. Venture capital, biotech companies, entrepreneurs, all the way to pharma. And to do that requires certain skills. And you can use, for example, Michael J. Fox as another foundation that is trying to follow a similar path. And clearly now the dialogue with pharmaceutical companies becomes critical, because the more advanced the programs get, they're going to be finally the ones that have the capital to bring them to that next stage. And unfortunately, we live in a environment right now where CNS have been de-emphasized. But to your point, and the point that you're trying to make, is the idea of bringing some of these technologies to the next inflection point. That when something that is clearly fulfilling the needs, whether it is a medical needs or whether otherwise, is going to be the right time for those companies to go to the next stage. So again, I would like to personally applaud you for your efforts.
I think the only answer is all shucks, Warren.
Karen, did you have a question over there? Yeah.
It's kind of a wrap-up question in the sense that time is tight, but also I'm curious, we have representation on this panel from venture capital, from corporate venture, from crowdfunding, from public equity investment. For each of you, from a therapeutic or device perspective, depending upon where you invest, what is the threshold? If you were to say to a young company, don't come to us until you can show us these things or you know this thing, is there a threshold that you would advise companies in preparing to raise money that they need to have hit, or they need to be able to describe that they understand?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, that's a million-dollar question, and obviously every investment opportunity has its own vicissitudes and nuances, and so everyone kind of stands on its own. But in general, the things that we think about are clearly the people, and we want extraordinary people involved. That's just not just the scientific founders. That's the business executives who are enabling it and moving it forward and helping reduce the execution risk that goes along with any endeavor. But I think the things that I think about, are superiority versus some, an animal model or standard of care in a clinical trial where something, if you really light it up, you've got something special. We've seen a lot, animal models have their own challenges and their own benefits, but I think that, if you can really get to a level of conviction that no one's really lit up this animal model before or demonstrated these clinical effects in an early trial, I think that can be something. That's stage agnostic, but I think to really demonstrate differentiation and superiority, that's exciting, and I think that's really worth investigating further. But I know that's kind of a squishy high level, but everyone will probably have its own technology validation pathway, and earlier on, if you can stack the deck against yourself and then really demonstrate something special and unique and not seen before or rarely seen before, that's really compelling for me.
And we have time for a couple more quick answers.
Yep, sorry.
As I mentioned before, I mean, we cover the whole spectrum from seed to typical VC investments to all the way to public companies, regardless of the stage. I would say we are putting more emphasis now in early stage opportunities, innovation, before proof of concept, because we agree that there is a valley of death, and we would like to help fulfill the pipelines of pharmaceutical companies. And with the guidelines, we hope to reach that next inflection point.
I think at a firm like Aberdare, it's a little different than a larger firm, but I think a small firm has to be very careful not to get involved too early because of the risk that I laid out. You want to get a certain amount of ownership, but you want to have enough dry powder. And so often that math just doesn't work. So if you look at Aberdare 4, which is our most recent fund, the one exception we made to that was Clovis, but that was a CEO. Pat's been a moneymaker, and Paul's been involved with his companies for the longest time. That's now a huge publicly traded company, and that was an exception, but that's the people factor. So there are things that can still make you go, I know you're going to need $200 million, but I know you're going to be able to raise it too. And the public markets will fund you. And so those are all qualitative factors that can change the thinking.
We don't really do that. We tell people, if you have an idea, come see us. Because we find out that these guys have an idea, these guys have an idea they've never met, maybe even different diseases, same mechanism they're dealing with. So we have the luxury of being able to say, you know what, come see us, and if we can't help you, we'll tell you. But we get the other question. Why should we come to you? And our answer is very simple, because you have to.
So I'm sorry, Sam, we're out of time. I'm sorry, everyone who has questions. I just want one single answer from each of you. Where do you think epilepsy innovation therapies, the most innovative therapies, will be 5 to 10 years from now? What will we have available to these patients?
God, it's tough. I would not be surprised if in my lifetime, so it's going a little bit farther than 5 to 10, if some sort of gene therapy or something where it's going to be replacing, having a real impact in intracranial gene therapy.
Manuel?
It's a risk.
I'm very excited by technologies like ultrasound or things that are not invasive. I think that there has been more advances in that space, but we'll have to see.
I think that and the work that's being done on inflammation, and tied to that, how we're understanding that there are so many of our diseases are tied to the health of our gut, particularly autoimmune diseases. And we're hearing these stories about fecal transplants working. I mean, this is weird stuff, but this is actually bacteria being brought in and out of balance and having huge impact, including, of course, in the gut. Fecal transplants are for IBD, but we're seeing now in autism some very interesting studies coming out. So we're connecting the gut and the brain. Okay. Is something big going to happen there? We don't know. I mean, it may be a crapshoot, but I find that very exciting.
Right.
What?
Well, as an American history major,
What did I say?
Micro.
the history of innovation is it will come from outside the field and it will be something you never imagined. So keep your eyes open and look around.
Great. Sam?
I'm going back to molecular mechanisms of disease. I think we'll learn a lot more over the next few years, and it's going to tremendous difference in our understanding of the disease and our ability to treat it, just as this approach has worked in many other diseases.
Great, thank you all so much. Great session.
We are very excited to kind of get going, and that is obviously the Shark Tank competition. I am Dr. Joseph Servin. I'm editor-in-chief of Epilepsy.com, and I have the pleasure of getting everyone set up at least as a prelude to truly the highlight of this conference. How can you beat spending an afternoon helping other people give away their money? And this is the way that we are going to kind of move forward. But before we get into the actual Shark Tank competition, it's important to kind of go back a little bit in the history of the Shark Tank and to kind of revisit two of the previous winners of the Shark Tank to hear how's it going as a way of kind of getting us started. And so our first person that I'd like to bring up is Mr. Charles Anderson. He was our 2012 Shark Tank winner for SAMI. And I'm going to have him come up and kind of guide us as to what's gone on with SAMI over the past 2 years.
All right, thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm going to start out with a video that we produced for our Indiegogo campaign that you've been hearing about. So why don't we start that? So this will give you a quick, here we go. Yep.
This is a quick demo of the SAMI Sleep Activity Monitor. The SAMI camera is installed on a wall opposite the bed. The iPod is located in your room. When the SAMI app is launched, it automatically connects to the camera and displays a live video stream. The camera has a microphone that is easily turned on and off. The camera is very sensitive to motion. In this setup display, the red shows the motion that the green meter is measuring. SAMI will ignore short movements such as rolling over. If motion continues, an alarm sounds. The display switches to live view and the microphone is turned on. All motion is recorded. SAMI makes it easy to quickly locate and view recordings of interest. Recordings made during an alarm are marked in red. These recordings are saved until you delete them and are easily shared with your doctor. SAMI is highly configurable. You may choose to use the alarm or just use SAMI for making recordings. When using the alarm, you may schedule the on and off times. There are also settings for alarm and microphone volume, for brightness, for motion detection thresholds and region. This has been a very brief description of the SAMI Sleep Activity Monitor. For more information, please visit our website at www.samialert.com. Thanks for watching.
So why do we do video monitoring for seizure detection? Video monitoring has a number of nice features. SAMI looks for movement over the entire body, and it's not just looking for repetitive motion, it looks for any motion. In our case, for example, our son's seizures often would look more like sleepwalking. SAMI is easy to live with. You install it on the wall opposite the bed, and there's no sensors that you have to remember to hook up or patches to put on. It just sits there and monitors for you. It reduces parental stress. Somebody pointed out earlier that by looking, a parent can very quickly determine whether something is wrong or not. So we provide that capability. And you can just check in whenever you want. And finally, the video recordings are very useful. We're actually surprised by the response on that. The video recordings give you a way of showing a doctor what is actually going on. It shows you the early onset of the seizure, which may not be observed, especially with nighttime seizures. And it gives you very accurate seizure duration information. I know when I was asked about duration of seizures, I couldn't give you anywhere close to an accurate number for that. If you're dealing with it, you have no sense of time. So SAMI obviously does not work for seizures with no movement. And the movement must be fairly continuous. It doesn't have to be large, but it does need to continue. Movement can be fairly small. The camera is sensitive. The alarm doesn't work very well with active sleepers or kids that sleep with a pet in the bed with them, although we found in many cases still the recordings are useful. And there are privacy concerns, especially with older children. And there's privacy concerns coming up recently about webcams being hacked into. SAMI does not connect to the internet, so that's not a big risk, but it is a concern. And finally, SAMI is not a medical device, so insurance reimbursement can be difficult. So progress. 2 years on, we've shipped now over 90 units to people. We've been doing app updates every 2 months, roughly. These are just pushed out to the iTunes App Store, and anyone with a camera can download and install it. We've started design of a 3rd generation camera. The main thing that we're trying to do is make it less expensive to manufacture and ramp up the volume. And then another big update on Tuesday, the Patent Office granted our patent on the technology, so that just issued. Thanks. Next steps, we're going to continue to work on it. One of the things I want to do is make it easier to share the recordings. And we're starting to look at connections to other sensors. If there's somebody here that wants to talk to me about adding video recording to their sensor, I'd be interested in talking to you about it. So, really want to thank the Epilepsy Foundation for their ongoing support. The Shark Tank competition win was important, but they've continued to support us. We've teamed up on this Indiegogo campaign. If you'd like to learn more about it, just go to Indiegogo.com and do a search for SAMI, S-A-M-I. Again, I really appreciate the efforts of everyone here and the attitude of urgency, which is really important. Thanks.
I know that Mr. Phil Gattone has an announcement that he'd like to make, and if you could stay right here, it'd be great.
Charles, I just want to let you know that with the Indiegogo campaign, the goal was $90,000, and if you check it out, you'll see that Charles and Cynthia just got past the halfway mark. There's 7 days to go still in the campaign, and I want to give you an announcement and tell you some good news that due to the generosity of an anonymous donor, the Epilepsy Foundation is going to be able to provide a matching gift up to $25,000 for the next $25,000 raised, which will put you guys over the mark. So we are really grateful for this anonymous donor and the donation made, and we just really want to incentivize everybody here to help push Charles and Cynthia over that finish line. So thank you very much, Charles, and congratulations.
Now let's hear from the 2013 Shark Tank winner to hear about the progress that's been made since last year in Miami when his name was announced. And that is Utkarsh Demirci, and that was for the project Bioacoustic MIMS in Medicine and Lab. So Utkarsh, a pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here again. Our goal has been to really develop a device that can measure from a finger prick volume. How do I switch to the next slide, by the way? Is there a button here that I need to use?
Right there, the green one.
All right. I'm supposed to be a technology developer and still yet having problems with it. But the idea is to be able to develop a finger prick device that you can use easily to be able to detect the levels of anti-epileptic drugs with devices that you can actually use and dispose in a microfluidic chip with a simple and inexpensive user. I need to see this on the web. Oh, you have to? All right. So the idea has been always, how can we develop these chips and reduce the cost and issues related to developing technologies to be able to reduce the cost and make these available in a patient's bag or at the bedside so that these measurements can be done in a timely manner and you don't have to lose the time between actually seeing a side effect to the blood collection and going to the hospital to get clinical tests. And another area that such devices can be really useful could be when you have to study multiple drugs and you have to actually see the drug-drug interactions, and there is always an issue with adherence of these patients when you are testing new drugs. So you would be able to actually use a cheap, a few dollar test to be able to monitor from a drop of blood or from a drop of saliva or other type of fluid, because our technology can handle multiple types of fluids to understand the different levels of drugs in patient circulation. And this can be actually pretty much multiplexed on the same surface. Our device is extremely simple and extremely sensitive and specific. It uses particles that are gold nanoparticles that are self-assembled to a surface, that are the yellow parts that you see with the right molecules on top, where you can just take this plastic surface and attach to it apply directly whole blood or saliva or other types of fluids so that you can capture the drug levels, and it requires just a single wash step. And over this year, we have been actually able to change this system so it can become a reader that is about $500 and a chip that costs a few bucks only to be able to monitor these levels using really a simple portable gadget that you see at the right bottom of the slide, which is just using the insides of the device that we have designed in our lab. And what we are looking at is pretty much the color change on the surface, which can give you actually data within the clinically relevant ranges of from few micrograms per ml to even higher levels. If you would like to actually look at the square there, that is our some serum-based testing that we have been optimizing this device for with the support from American Epilepsy Foundation within the past year, validating that these surfaces, these plastic surfaces that we used to use in old days when you had transparencies, where I would have less problem pointing out to the right slides, so those transparencies are now becoming your chips and devices to actually detect. In this case, we started with carbamazepine levels from serum, and it works with blood and other samples as well in a broad range. I would like to kind of point out that this technology can have on the same chip multiple types of drugs. We are actually going forward with patient samples. Once we have actually designed the system already and done these spiked experiments, we are moving forward to actual experiments with patient blood and saliva. And we want to actually, in addition to experiments with determining the drug levels, we want to do other functional assays that are important. This is an advantage of working with blood, being able to look at liver function and other measurements on the same chip in just a few minutes from the same finger prick blood sample of 10 to 20 microliters. In terms of commercialization, we had done a provisional within the past year around this application. and it's moving forward. And we have been talking to drug development companies and pharmaceutical areas in terms of getting this product out with Steve Zachter. I would like to take the opportunity to again thank the American Epilepsy Foundation as we move forward into a new year with this project, and it also allowed us to win a big competition in Brigham and Women's Hospital at the Harvard Medical School called the Bright Futures, which was around the same idea, and we are continuing our work. Hopefully next year, if we are here again, we will have more patient results and liver functionality assay results from actual patient samples. Thanks very much.
So now we'll get right to it, and Jackie is our moderator for this session, and we'll turn it over to her.
So this is what you've all been waiting for, I hope. This is the third live annual Shark Tank, and I want you all to think that you're the studio audience, and we have some rules of the road. We're going to be resetting the stage here a little bit. And the sharks are going to come up. So this is how everything's going to work. We have had a large pool of applicants. I guess they're the fish in the pool that the sharks are going to fish from. So we started out with 58 applications from all over the world. We had a call for applications, out of which we fished 6 finalists. And we picked these finalists because we thought that they had ideas, and these are any number of people, you know, from people who just have ideas in their own home, thinking about their own problems, but they know how to make them happen, to very high technology. So we've invited 6 people to come and present very briefly in front of you. So sharks, wherever you are, you get 5 minutes of presentation, 5 minutes, to convince us that your proposal, your idea is the one that deserves to win, that you're going to be standing here next year and telling us what kind of progress you've made. Now this year we're going to run it a little differently. We have assembled an incredibly long-toothed set of sharks. Actually, yeah, sharks do have teeth. And they represent... Sorry, Marty. They represent, and they'll tell you about themselves, but they represent all different types of people who might have some reason to have expertise that can add to what we know about these proposals and contemplate these proposals. And I will tell you all, too, very importantly, that the sharks have been given access to a little more fleshed out proposal than you all have access to. That will allow them to ask specific questions. And for that reason, we don't want you guys to make up your mind about anything until you've seen all of the sharks and you've seen all of the applicants, you've seen all of their presentations, and you've heard our sharks ask all their questions. Now, after that all happens, that's when the fun begins, because we actually have $200,000 that we are going to be giving away this afternoon on the spot. Now, that $200,000 will be broken up so that each of our sharks gets $25,000 in their pocket. I just made it happen. Feel in your pocket, and it's right there. Now, we have decided that $25,000 is probably not enough for any of these ideas to really get the boost we want them to have. And so we have decided there will be no loan sharks here. And we don't like loan sharks anyway. So therefore, if a shark is going to give away money, he has to get somebody else to believe in that idea too. So the minimum amount that we're giving away is $50,000. So fish over there, that means that if you hear some shark say that they like your idea, don't get too excited yet, because they have to get another person to like your idea too. So the minimum amount we're giving away is $50,000, all right? The sharks are going to decide how they're going to apportion the money that they have in their pockets. And then after that happens, the fish over here are going to get another 15 seconds to tell the audience why they should vote for them. And then the audience now has $75,000 in your pocket. And all of you should be online. Make sure you're online, and we're going to get some information, and you are going to be able to vote. And you will see in real time how the votes are going on a screen in front of you. And then your vote is going to decide that $75,000. So I hope you're all ready. I hope you're going to be paying really close attention. How many people have the app downloaded? Okay, most of you do have the app downloaded. If you haven't downloaded it, you have another hour while this is going on, while the presentations are going on, to download that app. So get online, download the app, because then and only then will you have an input. And the wonderful thing is that the people in this room represent our whole community. They represent patients, they represent parents, they represent doctors, they represent researchers, technologists, the private sector. This is you. And so all of you are going to decide which of these ideas is worth $75,000. Okay? Are you ready? Okay. Sharks, take your places. Okay. Are we missing a shark? Oh, no, there's only 5. That's right. There's an extra chair for me, but okay. All right, you guys move down then. Did you want to? They want to take this thing away. All right. Yes, that's the next thing. So the first thing we're going to do here, I'm going to move myself into the middle, sharks, after they take this away, is that. Oh, they're pulling it back. Okay. So each of you guys is going to start out. We're going to start over here and tell us who you are and why you particularly are good to be a shark this year.
Is this?
Yep.
All right, it's on. My name is Andy Smith. I think I was put on here because I have epilepsy. So I'm kind of the young face that also represents epilepsy. I currently work at Credit Suisse as an investment banker. However, I've been involved in the epilepsy world for quite a while. I worked in the National Youth Council for a while. And then before that, I was working with the Epilepsy Foundation for a little bit as well when I was down at University of Virginia. Up in New York, I'm also trying to get involved. I'm trying to help start up a Circle for Epilepsy, which is a nonprofit. And just trying to help research. So glad to be here. It's great to see all the faces and the support. Hopefully I can help.
And I'm Melton, so is this on? It's not, huh? Yeah. So, oh, it is. Thank you. So I'm from Rochester, Minnesota. I'm with the epilepsy program at the Mayo Clinic. I'm currently the president of the American Epilepsy Society. I think I got invited here because this is my 35th anniversary of working with people with epilepsy. I just reflected on it when I wish I really have Andy's age and credentials being with the venture firm and Credit Suisse. But I think that's the reason why I'm here.
I guess I'm a bit of an odd man out. This is the first time professionally that I have interacted with epilepsy as a syndrome, professionally, I guess we could just say. I actually am in the ag business. I work for a company that focuses attention on orchards. So we grow almonds and pistachios and try to better the world with healthy foods. I have a unique position in the company in that I actually run a small biotech within this ag company to understand how our phytochemicals, how the consumables that we take in, the oranges and the almonds and pistachios and pomegranates that we eat, how they may help us. I do have 2 people in my family who do suffer from epilepsy. So hopefully I can bring a bit of a professional thought that is outside of the realm of the therapeutic area, but also a personal touch to the thought process.
So is it almond or almond?
Depends on if you are a grower or a buyer.
But he's being modest because he also brought us Get Cracking and
yes.
and the Cutie.
And yes, QDs, and Fiji Water and Teleflora is also part of our organization. Yes.
Now they're impressed.
Now they're impressed.
My name is Marty Morell. I started out my life as an epileptologist not quite 35 years ago. I'm more sharp-toothed than long-toothed, Jackie, all of us are. But, and then after working at Stanford and at Columbia, I met Frank Fisher, and 10 years ago, well, actually 16 years ago, started working on the NeuroPace project 10 years ago, pretty much full-time, although my current Stanford boss, Bob Fisher, has allowed me to maintain my activity as a clinician. So I've spent a number of years now learning about how difficult it is to deliver brand new therapies to patients. And that is not only the funding, but the difficulty of designing clinical trials, not knowing until after it's done whether you've picked right or wrong, and then the considerable regulatory hurdles. I'm now in the process of enjoying learning about commercializing a product after 16 years. So anyway, that's my perspective.
My name is Mark Cuban. I own the Dallas Cowboys. Mavericks. In fact, that's not true. My name is Jim Abrams. I run a not-for-profit foundation called the Charlie Foundation, which we started 20 years ago when my son Charlie's epilepsy was cured by a ketogenic diet. After a number of more traditional epilepsy treatment options had failed. And I became aware at the time that that Charlie's was but one of millions of kids who preceded him prior to finding diet therapy. And so we started the Charlie Foundation in an effort to get the word out that a diet therapy can be a very effective therapy for kids with difficult to control seizures.
Thank you. All right. So now it is my pleasure to invite the first 5-minute fish, who will be John Davis, who will be telling us about shower power. Where is John Davis? There we go.
Hello, my name is John Davis. I'm here to present a safety device called Shower Power, and I've got a short video. Sorry.
Oh, they probably just unplugged it. Is it going to work or not, this one?
Hello?
You can use mine.
Tethered here. I'll stay close. Hi, my name is John Davis. I'm a inventor of the Shower Power. It's a safety device for showering, and there's a short video that we'd like to present in advance of my presentation.
The bathroom occurred in the bathtub and shower. Over 80% of these injuries were related to falls. Showering safety continues to be a growing concern. Shower Power is a shower safety monitoring system intended to provide protection, peace of mind, and showering independence. It was envisioned by Jonathan Davis, who has a background in chemistry and medical device development. In February 2014, John's youngest daughter, Claire, was diagnosed with junior myoclonic epilepsy. The inspiration for his design was developed as a way to safeguard his daughter after a seizure event occurred while she was showering.
I love my dad, and I am very proud he used his creative talents and ingenuity to develop a concept that will not only help me, but families everywhere facing the same concerns that we have with showering safety.
The Shower Power monitoring system consists of 5 interworking components for showering confidence: adjustable proximity sensor, shower water shutoff valve, phone base, relay unit, and a wall alarm. Shower Power, providing your loved ones with protection, peace of mind, and showering independence. Shower Power.
Well, there's the short video that we have. Let's get to the presentation. I think this is working right. This is the right button. There we go. Okay. Again, the shower power was a concept when my daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy basically 4 months ago. Our biggest concern was shower safety, and she did have a seizure in the bathroom area. And so what we wanted to do was provide independence for her, safety, peace of mind as a caregiver, and also for her as a patient of epilepsy. We've got a few statistics from New York Times, the CDC, and also from the Kansas City Star. And they're presented in graphical form here. Again, this chart shows the age group across the bottom and the rates of treatment in the emergency room on the y-axis. Again, these are rates per 100,000 people. As you see, the incidence in injury occurs as people typically get older. And again, in 2008, the rate was 22 million people went to the emergency room for falls and injuries in the bathroom. So there's a concern there. Broken down by sex, 2/3 are typically women, and the cause of injury is basically a trip or a fall. And again, this chart shows the activities that are most dangerous in the restroom, the bathroom, and bathing is up to almost 30% of those injuries. Some of them are also leaving and entering the tub area as well. So again, the shower is quite a dangerous place overall. And again, this chart shows essentially 70% of those trips and falls were in the bathroom area. And our experience as a parent was that, again, the first seizure from our daughter happened in the restroom, in the bathroom. And we didn't have an awareness at the time that she was having this seizure. And we wanted to provide her some privacy and autonomy. We were typically scared when she was in the shower listening for any incident that might happen in there. And we wanted to also provide in the future safety for her as she went off to college and gained her independence in the future. So again, the shower power is really a proximity sensing device that is looking for the upright posture in the shower. And if that does not occur, an event is triggered within these components. So essentially there's again, at this development stage, there's a time limit if a person were to go below the sensing device, and that would indicate that there's something not quite right. Again, this event would coordinate amongst the components. The water would shut off through a shut-off valve. This event would also trigger a phone contact. You could have a pre-programmed contact 911, a neighbor. And also there's a proximity alarm nearby that caregivers could be alerted that there was an issue. Here's a pictorial of a typical showering situation, and shows all the components in the shower there. And if there were to be a seizure in the shower in this case, the components would be combined together to provide safety for not only the patient but the caregivers as well. And we'll go through these individual components here shortly. Again, the first component is the proximity sensor. It is envisioned as a mountable component in the shower. You can adjust essentially it's it can sense the level of the person in the shower. It's adjustable for their height. At this point, we envision it about hip height, so if they were to reach down or shave their legs, it would still be indicated they were in the shower normally. Again, we have the shut-off valve. Again, all these components are battery-powered, so there wouldn't be any concern of electricity in the shower. And they're all connected through a wireless connection. You can have Bluetooth is the typically known, but there's some other solutions out there, Zigbee, and there's some other off-the-shelf solutions for communication amongst devices. There's the phone base. In this case, we have an iPhone in the cradle here. This would sit in the bathroom area. This is the signal relay that relays amongst all the other components and make sure that signal of the event is triggered amongst all the interconnected devices. And then finally, the event alarm that might be in the hallway outside the bathroom that could alert the caregiver. And again, I have a short timeline here. Typically, This timeline comes from my experience with the medical device development. I work for a company, we have diabetes analyzers, and I helped develop a product from napkin sketch through the FDA. And so there's typical device stages that we want to go through, essentially go, no-go steps to make sure that the design has been completed and the patents have been submitted for. At this time, I've submitted for a provisional patent, and so that's ongoing at this point with the patent office. So there's typically 5 stages to the program: developing the device, getting it through testing, manufacturing, some licensing agreements in stage 4, and then finally the 5th stage is, maybe that's the valley of death, which is the FDA. And again, this is an unknown territory. Certainly with the device development that I experienced with our diabetes device, there was a lot of back and forth with the FDA. So it really is kind of an unknown question at that point. And again, I'm with a company. I'm the senior systems architect for the diabetes device that we have, and I led that device from napkin sketch again through the commercial development. And I've got a research team that helped me with that device as independent contractors, and they've agreed to come on board with me as well. So again, in short, we want to provide safety, independence, peace of mind for the patient and the caregiver, and the shower power components again.
So we are open for questions from the sharks.
Do you think you're going to have to go through FDA? Could this be a non-regulated device?
It certainly could, and I believe the SAMI device is clearly paved the way for not having to go through that route. I'm sure he may be envisioning the FDA route, but I do believe there's a possibility that it could just be an off-the-shelf component that people wouldn't have to go through the FDA device development process.
So you might have a product that did not require FDA approval
Yes.
first, and then consider your regulatory path?
Yes, that could be possible.
Then if I were a shareholder, I would imagine your market is bigger than in epilepsy.
Yes. Yes.
Right? We were saying about this nursing homes, for example,
Yes.
or in my home in a few years maybe. And and you may not necessarily need FDA approval for that. I don't know. I have a question though.
Yes, sir.
So you have described an idea. I really like the idea, but you didn't tell us about the method of sensing. Is it because you don't want other people to know? Or?
No. At this point, again, I've only had about 4 months to give this whole concept birth, and so we're working with the engineers on
so
how
you don't even know what your sensor is going to be.
No, at this point, it might be optical or ultrasonic to again sense motion in the showering area.
Okay. And by the way, one last area, and I don't mean to chastise you,
Yes.
but I did check with one of our leaders here, and we don't use the word epileptic.
Okay.
Yes, in your paper.
Okay.
But we commonly make that mistake.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, do you know if it's so you don't know yet whether there'd be any interaction with a vagal nerve stimulator? If somebody with epilepsy, are you familiar with implants?
I've read a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
so would there be a reaction or an interaction?
I don't believe so. Again, being a Bluetooth wireless device, I would imagine that those would not have an interaction with implantable devices. So that's a good concern, and we can be sure we're not having any interaction.
How much are you anticipating a unit would cost?
Well, at this point, again, it's an early stage, but I would imagine maybe the package for roughly $200 might be a good starting point, would make it an affordable option for patients.
And you gave us some stats on the number of accidents that do happen.
Yes.
If you extrapolated from that and you said, okay, that would give me a market of X in terms of just people, forget about dollars.
Right.
But you can answer dollars too.
Okay.
How big are we talking about? How big a...
Well, again, the latest statistics that I read on the epilepsy website was that there was possibly 2 million epilepsy patients, and certainly there is a potential, again, in the aging market and in other diseases which might bring more than the 2 million patients. And certainly, again, aging and also the youth market as well might boost the numbers past that point.
So, Dr. Morell, I was asked to ask you to comment about your experience, and maybe Dr. So as well, about patients and accidents in the shower.
Yeah, and this actually gets to a question I have. So I have had 2 patients in over 20 years, I gave it away, who fell in the shower and blocked the drain, one because they closed it, and the other just because their body covered it, that one died and one had a drowning injury with pretty significant permanent brain injury. But my question is, you showed the statistics for accidents, bathing accidents. That's a pretty broad category. So I see this happening. I see somebody dropping. They're still going to have the head trauma. What is it that, what do you imagine that you're going to do for somebody who has a fall in the shower as far as preserving their safety?
I think it's twofold. Certainly one is shutting off the water and preventing the drowning potential. Again, that was, as a parent, our first concern. Again, also is the proximity sensor through the phone and also through the wall alert in the general vicinity for caregivers to come to their aid. So again, I don't believe it will prevent the event. It'll just make it a safer event.
Will the interface allow for any other information to flow through the, I guess, phone application besides just the alarm?
At this point, I'm not sure, but certainly that could be built into the app and have some more statistics put into that call through the iPhone app.
So, have you developed a beta app? Have you developed anything yet past the concept?
No, I haven't at this point, but I do have my engineers are, again, we developed this laboratory analyzer with, essentially with circuit boards from the ground up for this laboratory analyzer, so we have experience in software and engineering from the electrical and mechanical and device and design development stages.
So from a flowchart perspective, you've identified your buckets, you just haven't
correct.
done it.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask you for my microphone back. And thank you very much. So any of you, who want to see a shower power a couple of years from now, think about that when you're making your vote. The next person I'm going to invite up here is Nirav Sheth, who is going to talk to us about the Biostamp wearable sensor.
Thank you, Dr. French. I'm a vegetarian. I don't know if it's going to help me. I don't think so.
They would have to be vegetarians.
Well, now the question is, do you bleed?
I do, and that'll probably show. So my name is Rav Sheth. I'm with a company called MC10. We're a technology startup in Cambridge, Massachusetts, whose mission is about bringing conformal electronics to challenges in life. We have brought some interesting applications and solutions to consumer healthcare and to performance athletics and fitness, but it has always been a passion of ours and a mission of ours to go and try and apply our technologies into healthcare. So it was a pretty exciting opportunity for us when we came across the Shark Tank event here at the Pipeline meeting, and thank you also for the panel for selecting us to be here. So, since we are new to epilepsy, we did probably what most companies would do who are smart to begin with, which is go ask people who actually might know what the unmet needs are in the space. And so if we could cue the video, this is what we heard.
I think it's hard for something to make a transition better. I wish doctors knew more about how specific medications react to specific bodies.
With epilepsy, you really need to know the effect of the medication on the patient.
The doctors, to properly or fully diagnose the situation, needed more accurate information, and that's when I was admitted to a hospital. And at that point, it was still monitored by my parents. In the hospital, what they could do is just be next to me, and at night, they could tell I was having a seizure, and at that point they would press a red button. So that would immediately go into the history of that night, and that would more closely identify when I had seizures and how long they were. My mother made this book. Well, this just has when I had seizures and when I didn't, and also medication I was taking at one time, when it changed, by how much it changed. You know, was I taking 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams? Was I taking it just in the AM or the PM or in the afternoon as well? At that point, she was very much relying on me telling her about my seizures, and to be quite honest, I did lie a lot about that, just because if I told my parents exactly what was happening at certain times, I knew that they would be more upset about it than I was.
Our frustration was in getting her to take her medication. The side effect of the particular drug she was taking was weight gain. She wasn't taking her medicine. She was either spitting it out or going into the other room and flushing it down the toilet. When she got older and got to be an adult, it was much harder to monitor because you, as an adult, you couldn't stand there anymore and say to her, okay, take your medicine.
I needed more than just my resilience. I needed a doctor's opinion of how the medication was affecting me. I guess if there was some type of device that I could carry on me, that an automated device that could just capture every episode that I had, if it could put a timestamp on it. And if that would detect every seizure and report back to much more accurate data to my doctors and to my family. If something like this could record my seizures accurately, it would certainly take the place of people, my parents, my friends, monitoring me, and it would certainly save them a lot of time and, you know, give my parents much more sleep.
What we're doing here in MC10 would be very useful to me in monitoring Christy's seizure activity and how her body responds to different medication.
So that was kind of abrupt. Okay. I'm here somewhere. Point it in every direction.
Pointing at front is probably best.
Can we just go to the next slide? Okay, we'll stop there. So I lied. I'm actually not a vegetarian. But I was trying to get away with something, which is something that we actually found in several interviews we did with adolescents as well as parents of adolescents with respect to epilepsy. And so when it came to what could MC10 do about the situation, we were pretty excited. We focus on conformal technology, conformal sensing, and the device that Pat was holding up in his hands is the same thing I'm holding up here. It's just orange for visuals, but there's actually a nice one here with electronics in it that I'm going to pass around to the sharks. And so to just build the points, I think, about what MC10 could do to help persons with epilepsy, it's about passive wearability, or passive sensing and wearability. So if you look at the pictures on the screen, you're looking at pictures of adolescents, teens, folks who have a desire to live their own life and do not want to be reminded that they have a condition. And so if they want to live their lives, how do they continue to monitor what they want to monitor but still go on living? And so the idea of having a wearable skin patch that could be positioned in multiple locations, it could be on the arm, it could be on the torso, the leg, that makes a big impact. We could have multiple ones. We heard yesterday in the pipeline meeting about the need for multiple modalities. We have the opportunity to do that as well with these patches. And the other thing that's sort of not shown is the fact that these are all folks for whom communication can be a barrier. The accuracy of communication, having the right language to record something, that may affect teens who may lie, but it also affects the folks who have the seizures and the other events that happen at nighttime. for which there is no recording. So the other things that we can offer. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a picture of the diary. The fact that you have the ability to sense things electronically takes what is subjective information, which is difficult to stay consistent, right? Even in the transition from just childhood to adulthood, and a diary that was originally kept by a mother and now being recorded in by the patient herself or himself, or someone who goes away to college and now even changing physicians. Changing from a subjective, both recording method over to an objective one from a sensor-based technology adds value. We have also, while we've been focusing on hardware and technology, been focusing on software. So MC10 actually comes at epilepsy from a small history now in movement disorders, where the idea of tremors and the idea of diaries has already been prominent, where in fact billion-dollar drugs have been approved by the FDA partially and sometimes significantly based on data that comes from improvements in patient diaries. So replacing those diaries and that subjectivity with information that can go on an app, the communication to a smartphone that's recording not just the objective data from our sensors, but in addition, data that may come from the patient themselves or other inputs as well is critical, because we know that epilepsy, and if you didn't know before, or if I didn't know before these last couple of days, I certainly know now it's as much of a lifestyle impact as it is a clinical one. The communication piece is critical. This gentleman here may be long-toothed or sharp-toothed, I'm not sure, but he may be a physician, he may be a father, he may be the patient himself, but the idea is that if we can take the information, turn it into something that is usable and trackable, which is clearly possible with the cloud and with our own apps as well, we can transmit it to whoever it needs to be transmitted to. So what is the guts of the device? This slide actually shows to everyone, I think, basically what we're talking about. So this is the device that's, I don't know if it transitioned over. Good, as long as everyone had a chance to see it. It's a silicone encapsulated patch that's, thanks, Dr. French, I'll just hold it up. So it actually is very flexible, and this is something that has the ability to measure. It has a 3-axis accelerometer in it, similar to what you might find in your smartphones, in addition to having a battery, a Bluetooth radio antenna, as well as the ability to measure biopotentials with electrodes as well. Sorry, thank you. So all those things are possible with the device. And finally, taking a step back from the individual or the patient back to sort of just therapy in general and the efficacy of care. The reality is if we have this sort of data, and we know that there are data issues that have to be resolved as we've discussed over the last couple of days, but the access to that data, as is shown, I think, by these two articles that we found pretty interesting, and I think have both quotes and perhaps authorship from folks up here on the podium. At least, Dr. French, I recognize your name multiple times. The fact is, having better information does help drive the advance of diagnosis and therapy of conditions, and hence research, and and improve the search for a better care. So for a better cure. So those are all things that we believe are enabled by our technology. So what we need, why we're here, why I'm here, is we need partnership. We don't come at this from a deep knowledge of epilepsy. What is clearly present in this room, both in the companies, the companies who are startups, the researchers, there have been funders up here as well, has been the fact that we need to all share that information. The Epilepsy Foundation has already been quite kind enough to give us this podium to speak from, but the physicians who are shown there, in addition to the ones that you see here, Dr. Dorsey is a pioneer in telemedicine and Parkinson's, and someone that we've been fortunate to have a relationship with here at MC10, in addition to identifying some of the folks who have been really pivotal in bringing more patient engagement. And PCORI, which has come up as well, which does not have actually, when you do a search of their database, that many epilepsy-focused grants given out compared to some other disease states. Those are all things that we actually think that we would want to change, and with your help, we could. So the plan over a certain timeline, and I'm sure our dollars and timelines will be different through each presentation, but our idea is to show a proof of concept for potentially a particular kind of seizure or a group of seizures. It might be tonic-clonic, it may be partial, focal, what have you. We want to go find out what are the right sensors, therefore, to put in our hardware and to detect what and over what time period. That's where we would really need help. over a period of time, as you can see from the prototype, we could create prototypes that would then be able to be placed on humans to just prove out certain ideas. Targeted validation, we believe, would take some time if we want to validate it from the standpoint of creating information that would be compelling enough to physicians to be able to work with their own patients to recommend something. We believe that that would be necessary, so we've identified a length of time to do that, as well as a significant dollar investment as well. And finally, if you really want broader adoption and real scale, electronics is pretty funny. It's the price really comes down when you're able to achieve scale, and we believe having the ability to sell millions of these things does bring consumer-type price points into play. And so this would be something that would be really important, but would obviously take some time as well. So that's essentially our pitch, and I think if we think about what our mission is and the journey we would like to start with all of your help, I think it's very similar to the journey that Pat describes on the next video.
If I can help, a boy who's 6 and whose family is up at night and thinking about seizures and surgery just like my family was, and if I could make his or her life better, then I want to be a part of that.
So thank you to the foundation for allowing us this opportunity. If Pat looks familiar at all, it's because he ought to. He is actually on the CDC website. We were incredibly fortunate for him to actually be a friend of a friend. So great thanks from us to both Pat and John, who were there on the video. And questions?
Thank you very much. And I do have to take a couple of points away because you couldn't find Andy's picture on Facebook.
The silent face of capital.
All right, the floor is open for questions.
Yeah, I was granted your video was interrupted, but I had trouble figuring out whether you're trying to track drug reactions or seizures.
That's actually a great question. I think we walked in probably somewhat naively with an idea that we could do a great many things. Actually, after listening to some of the ideas yesterday around the correlations of temperature, EMG, and other aspects to certain types of seizures, we believe we may actually have a shot at some of the seizures because we do have the algorithm capability. But that said, I think that's why that first step is so important. I think in speaking to both patients and clinicians, we would probably be able to narrow in on a specific target a lot easier than we have been able to thus far.
Yeah, Marty.
So I share Jim's confusion. I don't know what product you're talking about, and I'm not sure that you guys have spent a lot of time looking at what else is going on in the community, because we've been talking about seizure diaries and external wearable seizure sensors for a long time. So can you tell us what you offer beyond what we already have or what we've heard today we'll probably have in the near future?
That's a great question. So I think there's actually two major things going on. One is from a simple monitoring standpoint, we have the ability to obviously monitor on multiple parts of the body. So to the extent that you can get information from just the wrist, which was a prominent location that was mentioned yesterday, that's great. But the reality is there are things that happen elsewhere in the body that are important to specific types of seizures. So for example, to the extent that we would want to measure something from the calf or the arm or the torso, if we want an EKG response, those are the kinds of things that we could offer.
But you don't have this device yet, and you can't tell us that you could actually do these things. Is that right?
So actually, because of our recent experiences in movement disorders, we know that we can actually write algorithms to detect certain kinds of tremors. So that is a level of proof. It is not the full point, clearly. We've actually also done feasibility with EKG and with temperature as well.
Yeah,
no, go right ahead. So talking about scalability, as I'm sitting here and I have my fuel band on my wrist, is what you're talking about hardware or software? If it's hardware, then it becomes more highly specialized. If it's software, it would seem that it could be baked in, theoretically, into wearables that could be sold to almost anybody. You just pick the right app with the right software, and that would drive down your costs significantly. So could you speak to me a little bit about software versus hardware and how cost structure would take place?
So there's two very different skill sets going on. I think one is just about identifying what the right sensing modalities are and the right locations in the body. And so to the extent that you haven't locked that yet, you don't have a hardware solution yet. Once that is locked, and I've given you sort of one application of it, or one prototype of that that's here now that we're showing, once you have that locked in, then you can get that to scale, and then that drives those costs down. On the software side, what we find is that there's actually a series of different types of algorithms that can be written. If you simply want gait, that's great, but if you want fall detection, that's another one. And those are incredibly portable and have very little marginal cost. So I think those are good points. I think it all comes back to what is the most effective application of this technology to patients now, and that's where we would start. We could do both.
I think
Okay.
Elson and then Andy.
Okay. I'll just make a quick question. And the situation is that, as far as I know, there is not a reliable set of parameters yet to say there is a positive predictive value of, let's say, 92%. If you see this set coming up, this patient had a seizure. So you are developing a very, very advanced type of device when the parameters have not been validated. So there seems to be a mismatch. Not that you shouldn't go your way. I mean, this is important. But is that a sort of valid concern?
I actually would turn the concern into an incredible positive for persons who have epilepsy, which is a lot of what we've driven in here. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we've actually started performance athletics and fitness, as well as in consumer health. So a lot of the scale of what we're investing in and what we're trying to develop actually does come at this from a different input or impetus. So you're right, this is pretty involved and very evolved as well, but it wasn't originally intended for the epilepsy population per se. It was intended for other pretty large-scale applications, including, for example, movement disorders, as I mentioned, as I showed the Parkinson's app earlier. So as a result, what we would love to do at MC10 is partner with the folks here to find specific applications of something like this that actually you don't actually have to develop from scratch.
Thank you.
We don't.
Could you better explain the reporting process? So is the information flowing directly to the doctor, or is it going to the parents? Or I mean, I guess it depends on who your target is, a child or an adult. But.
No, that's great. I mean, the ideas of data and who owns it, where it goes, are actually, I think, continually evolving in the healthcare space, and if actually that's also true in the consumer space as well. So we have the ability to send this to the cloud. It's possible. In fact, we had a startup yesterday who came up here, and they've already built all that infrastructure. There are pharmaceutical companies, consumer companies who are all actually prominently announcing their ability to do that. So for us to be able to do that is clearly possible. I think what ends up happening is, do we want to use this at the very beginning for a specific clinical research trial for a particular drug? In which case, the way in which that data may be managed for that application may look very different than something that's in-home use.
Okay, so you plan on doing it in-home initially, or?
Our end goal, frankly, if I didn't say it, I'd like to say it again. I mean, we're a very patient-centric company. We're a people-driven company. So our goal is not to develop technologies for this like this that just simply get used in limited ways.
Right.
It may be easier to get into clinical trials sooner, but our end goal is to have something like this available for everybody.
Right. Okay.
One last question.
Real quick question. How long-lived is this piece of hardware, one? And then two, do you need to have your smartphone with you in order to constantly be uploading information, or does it have some type of built-in memory?
So yes, it does have memory, and so really that comes back to the application. You have the ability to map, I think it's 20 to 30 feet on Bluetooth low energy,
Okay.
or 20 to 30 meters, sorry, forget which one it was, but so that's the distance. It doesn't have to be right next to you.
Okay.
And then in terms of the storing and what you want to transmit, you have the ability to stream constantly. That simply drives greater battery needs. You also have the ability to sort of store some memory and then transmit it over time or certain times of the day, which obviously uses a lot less energy.
Thank you very much. All right, so if you would like to see the Biostamp wearable sensor come to the marketplace, you will have a chance to place your vote. So next, Sandy Helmers is going to come and talk about WebEase, Enhanced Youth Epilepsy Management Behaviors.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here, and actually an honor. So I would like to talk to you about something that we have to switch gears for, and that is, this is not a seizure detection. This is not an assay for blood levels. This is not a therapy. This is actually a toolkit for self-management, and it's for youth with epilepsy. And with that, how many of you have teens? I have bunches of them right now. And you know the lives that these kids lead, the lives that you lead because of their lives, the stress, the sleep problems, the coping with friends, the daily activities, parents with carpools, and organizing schedules. Layer on top of that medication adherence. Layer on top of that the possibility of seizures. And you have a disaster waiting to happen sometimes, right? So, what I want to talk about is epilepsy self-management. So what the heck is it? Because I find that a lot of people don't really understand this. So, what it is being able to allow someone to learn to better control their epilepsy. That means adherence. That means managing sleep. That means managing stress and whatever else. Better control the comorbidities that go along with epilepsy. Mood. What do I do with my friends? Do they know? What happens if I have a seizure in front of my friends? What the heck am I going to do? The stress and the anxiety. Well, self-management for youth exists, but it exists for asthma, cancer, diabetes, surprise, not for epilepsy. So what we want to do is take a product that we already have, or a toolkit that we already have, called WebEase, that is created for adults, by adults, and actually adapt that for kids that are in the teenage years for use to better self-manage, to actually help in the transition of care. So let's talk about that. So what the heck is WebEase? WebEase is a self-management tool that was created by adults for adults with epilepsy. It's evidence-based. We've already done a handful of randomized controlled trials that show that self-management, self-efficacy, and actual medication adherence actually do improve with this tool. It's free. That's a novel thing. It's internet-based, so access issues become less of a problem. It's interactive. And also, as I said, created by adults for adults with epilepsy. So it's very patient-centric. What we want to do is take and adapt, I don't know why this keeps doing this, adapt this for 12 to 17-year-olds to create WebEasy. Now, we envision to have a couple of units that will address medication adherence and also coping skills. This program, the WebEase itself, actually tracks seizures, tracks medication adherence, so do you take your medication correctly and how often, those sorts of things. It tracks stress levels, your sleep quality, and also your seizures, which are inputted by the person with epilepsy. We'll take all of that and put it into a program for kids, but make it more likable by the kids, more interesting, because all these kids, the teens, what's integral in their life? Technology, tech games, internet, Instagram, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to actually have to use that for the advantage of being able to get this to the kids. This is just a mock-up of what it could potentially look like, because what we're going to need to do is do focus groups, and this is my public health hat, focus groups to actually talk to teens, what they feel would be important for them to actually use this and to continue to use this. And what you can see on here, it may be a little difficult, but this would be like the landing page. It would be interactive. So you could potentially have an avatar, talk to them, and take them through things. You have a home button. You also have the different modules or the units on there so they can access it from this page. You can do My Diary, enter your medications, identify what kind of seizure you have, also how well am I doing. Then way up in the top on the right-hand side, you see this points. This is value-based, we could call it gaming points or value-based point system that would reward them for using this. And they could earn points to use, let's say, I want I've never played it, but one of my kids does. I want a tool on Minecraft. So let me go get it. Spend those points. Or if they're not into Minecraft, but they would like something else, could they use those points to actually then cash those in? And this is one thing that we'll have to do, is look at partnerships with gaming industries, those sorts of things, because there's no way in a short period of time and with limited funding to be able to do that. Plus, we just don't have the resources. And it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. But that would be the landing page. So, in essence, fulfilling the epilepsy needs of youth and parents, because parents would be involved in this because they have to give permission to use the internet. We could push text notices to say, your child has done a great job with this, and this is where they're moving, and actually start dialogues about their epilepsy. It would engage them. It's personal. This data is stored, but it's all HIPAA compliant. Independence, learning, all of those things all translate into youth epilepsy self-management. Now, what I'd like to do is end with this video.
This program is brought to you by Emory University.
So it doesn't dictate your life. I see a lot of kids in my practice, and they all have epilepsy.
Dr. Sandra Helmers has spent the majority of her career figuring out ways her young patients and their parents can better manage seizures caused by epilepsy.
You want to have the children, number one, take ownership of their disease, and that is sometimes difficult. Concerns that we had were, are you always taking your medicines? You want that independence, so we're not always hovering over her.
David Loring says coping with the stress caused by trying to keep his daughter's epilepsy under control has been a lifelong struggle.
It has effects throughout the family, and that's one of the things that we're constantly dealing with, because now we have a kind of a sick child who's in charge. We're worried about seizures if we go to Disney World.
Xavier Austin has had epilepsy since he was 2.
Yeah, I was bullied when I was little.
Although he hasn't had a seizure in a while and is well adjusted now, he still remembers a time when the condition isolated him from his peers.
I guess I acted like I had a problem, and I guess epilepsy was the problem.
It's making all of this up right now.
Many kids with epilepsy struggle to fit in socially, and the problem is often compounded once they reach middle school.
Middle school was a nightmare. I think it's a nightmare for a lot of kids.
They're at a vulnerable stage where you need to give them tools to feel confident that their epilepsy they can manage, also confident that they can have good peer interactions, so you build that confidence in steps.
Dr. Helmers and other experts at Emory University are working on an easier way to make those steps more appealing to teens with epilepsy by modifying a web-based training tool called WebEase.
WebEase was initially created for adults, and we actually have validated and proven that your self-efficacy, your ability to do the self-management, and not only for a short period, for a longer period, works. We've shown that in the adult population. What we're doing now is we want to adapt this to the 12 to 17-year-old age group.
To provide them with skills about how to better, for example, take their medication, or to better manage their sleep, or to better manage their stress. So that's I think the core of WebEase would actually show you.
Dr. Helmers and her team are currently surveying young people with epilepsy to determine specific ways the interface might be made more enticing to a younger audience.
It's work, but it's going to be fun. It is going to keep their attention, because what we want to do is we want them to engage. They can actually choose a goal that will fit them, that will be attainable, and then go back, check out, and see how they did. If they need some more practice with that, they can do that. If they have successfully met that goal, then they can set another one.
Fun and games aside, the youth version of WebEase is not intended to be a permanent crutch, but a tool that will empower the child with epilepsy to learn coping skills that can last a lifetime.
Well, I think anything that's fun and engaging, kids are going to be drawn to.
They're going to feel more safe around themselves, around others. and just have a sense of, I have this under control.
And if you can empower that child and the family to actually take control of that, you have a different family, a different kid.
The preceding program is copyrighted
can
by Emory
cut it.
University.
So I just want to say thank you, and just to leave a couple of words that this is empowering in a really important group for transition of care, and also for parental confidence that their child can do this.
Okay. Comments from the sharks?
This is all, it's great, and we all need all the help we can get with adolescents, whether they're our patients or our children. But Sandy, I have two questions. One is, you have WebEase, so you need to tell us whether it's been working and whether people want it and whether they use it. Granted, this is for adolescents, but are the adults using this? And the second is, it seems to me there's a lot of stuff out there for teens about disease self-management, teens with epilepsy, maybe in bits and pieces. So what have you looked at what else is out there, and what more would you be able to offer?
So it was created a number of years ago for adults, and adults still use this. It is actually available at webease.org, and the uptake is there and continues. As far as for adolescents and chronic disease management, as I said, asthma is a big one. I'm most familiar with that. Most of the self-management at this point in time is face-to-face, or it's getting the parents to enable the child to do the self-management. It's not e-health, which I think is a big advantage, and it's free. And it will engage with, on a platform that they all use now. And so I think that's what this actually brings to the table. And again, you can't take a chronic disease management for asthma and I think translate it to epilepsy, because epilepsy I think is very special.
I'm going to give a shout out to Andy here, who once upon a time was an adolescent. So.
Yeah, still am.
Closer than we are.
I guess one question I have is, how many questions does it take in order to do the reporting process? Knowing that our generation is a little more ADD, and I sometimes can't even fill out some forms because they're a little too long. I guess if I was to have a seizure and then wanted to report it, if it was more than 5 or 6 questions, it would be extremely tough for me to want to use this application, because I'd say it's not worth it.
You're absolutely right, and that's one thing that we need to do to adapt the adult version, because it is text heavy and it is a pain.
Will you still be getting enough information?
Yes, we will. Basically, that's all you need to do, and just it's not included in this, but we have a mobile app also that is going to follow the web base, because a lot of kids have smartphones, and it's not just going to be for iOS, it'll be for the Android also. And they'll be able to upload that information just like that.
And then are you capable of remembering answers so that they can then?
Yes, yes. Okay. And it will, again, be stored short term, but we can always store it longer term for on the cloud. But again, and this is one thing, Emory and I think a lot of us are, it's HIPAA compliant and totally confidential.
Yeah. Okay. And then another question, in terms of, I guess, moving over to the mobile gaming and trying to have that as a partnership, one concern I have with that is that, do you think people will start to abuse it for the points? I know that, again, they become very addictive. You'll see people playing games 24/7. Is there any concern that people will start reporting seizures just so they can get points?
That's possible, and we have no control over that. But again, with parental control of this, they'll be there in the background, because they first of all have to give permission to allow them to go on the internet. Okay. Second of all, with the parental sort of oversight that we'll be able to sort of help with as far as pushing texts and things like that, that might be a stopgap for that.
Yeah. Just a
That's a good question.
point of concern, though. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
One more question. Oh.
It's okay.
Okay.
So, we know we've just heard a couple presentations, and these presentations were about products that were capturing in an automated fashion data. Yours is the opposite direction. Can you speak to us a little bit about movement of data and accuracy of, self-reporting?
Well, that's a good question because we've struggled with that. And we do not marry some of these automated seizure detectors, but this is more than just a seizure detection and medication monitoring. This is a self-management tool. It's a toolkit to let people learn about self-management, why it's important, and to set goals. So it's like if you wanted to lose 20 pounds and you had to change your diet and change your activity, you just can't do it just like that. You do it in steps, or you wanted to quit smoking. First of all, you have to figure out, well, yeah, I would like to lose weight or quit smoking. Then how do you do it? And this program actually goes through with this motivational interviewing, set stages, and then feed information as far as the level that you're at. Are you willing to, do you want to hear about this, or you're not ready yet? And give you the tool to say, okay, I understand, this is a goal I can set. And do it, and then you check in and say, I've done that goal, and you're starting to learn. So it's a learning thing, and not just a detection.
Last question. I'll use the word analog inappropriately, okay? How quickly can you get to your avatar stage with it not being stalled in this analog version where it's just maybe clicking a button or typing a text, where you can actually have some dynamic interplay that will really engage the child into wanting to perform as necessary with the program such that you get the feedback necessary to.
That's a good question, and what we're doing is we're working with our IT department, and that we have the group, we have the self-management experts, we have the Emory IT folks who've worked on the previous version and the mobile app, and what we need to do is then change that interface, and that's what they're doing.
This is 3 months, 6 months, 6 year?
That's going to probably take about 6 months. We do a month to 2 months of focus groups, probably about a month, and then we're going to do about 6 to 7 months of software adaptation based on the focus groups input. Those are teams. And then that takes us to about 9 to 10 months. Then we're going to roll it out.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next, I invite Oren Knopmacher and Professor Bob Fisher returning to the stage to talk about an in-home and inexpensive anti-epileptic drug monitoring device using saliva.
Thank you. Oh, Jackie, you said fish. I thought you said Fisher. That's where I came up again. No, all kidding aside, I'm up here as a partisan because I'm a co-founder with Dr. Knopmacher about the technology to inexpensively and portably be able to measure every day your anti-epileptic drug levels and other drugs as well, as we will hear. The company is called Avails Medical. To avail yourself of an opportunity, but if you take a moment and scramble the words, you may come up with some other relevant bodily fluid in the name. So the point that I made, marketing is everything. The point that I made yesterday stands, which is the biggest problem that many of us clinicians, including me, have in caring for patients is inadequate information. And furthermore, it's really critical, I think, to empower the patient and the family to have information to take care of his or her own health. And this will be a breakthrough technology that will let this happen in a way it has not happened before. In my view, the best seizure is one that's avoided. And right now, if you talk about serum levels in a medical meeting, even though I know there is excitement about it, and we just heard about another technology to do it as well. Often eyes start rolling, and they should start rolling, because we are terrible at understanding what levels of these drugs mean and using them in a proper way. The usual approach is to have a patient have a seizure, call the doctor and say, I just had a seizure. We say, gosh, I'm sorry. I'm going to add you on Friday. And of course, because they had the seizure, they just got scared to death, and they just take a bunch of their seizure medicine, which they may or may not have been taking before, and they have a level 2 days later in clinic that has nothing to do with the level that they had when they were doing the medicine. And by the way, why are we doing this after the seizure occurred or after someone has become toxic? So the Avails approach is to have people measure their level every day by spitting on a disposable, very cheap strip made from a type of transistor that you'll hear about in just a moment, sticking the dry end of the strip into a very portable reader, and then having a readout immediately of what their level is. It's also possible, although we've not enabled it yet, to link that to web-based advice programs. So our prototype was to pick the medication that's most used in the epilepsy clinics right now. That 25.6% that's up there is for levetiracetam, Keppra, but we could also do it for lamotrigine, topiramate, carbamazepine, valproic acid, or a variety of other medications. We use salivary levels not only because you don't have to stick your finger, but because they better reflect what gets into the brain. They're unbound. And when I was a young whippersnapper in the epilepsy business, many a time I would send saliva to the lab for measurements. We're translating that into the home environment. So the advantage is getting ahead of the seizure toxicity curve. I won't read the whole left side of the slide for you, but again, what we are doing is we are allowing people to take control of their own health and to stay healthy and to avoid problems. Now let me turn over for the rest of our 5 minutes to my colleague, a PhD physicist trained at Stanford, Dr. Oren Nafmacher, with the propitious initials OK, who's worked for 10 years with these field effect transistors, using them to make all kinds of very precise measurements. And I'm very pleased to have been able to recruit him into applying this technology to the medical problem with epilepsy as its first proof in principle. Oren, please take over, and this is the forward button.
Thanks, Bob. Well, with every technology which is available, there must be also a way for a great market opportunity. So our technology, which you're going to show in a second,
talk to the microphone, please.
Everybody hears me, yeah. Our technology, which we make available to anyone basically, is cheap. We use disposable strips, which you can buy and then just dispose after use. Our technology works in any body fluid, so we can use saliva, as we just heard. We can even use it in blood, in urine, or other body fluid which are available. And not only that, once we made our technology available for all the epilepsy medication which are around, we can also scale it to any other vertical. So you can imagine using it for people who have heart diseases, people who need to take blood thinner. You know, there's a lot of potential for technology out there. So basically what we have developed is a prototype where you have like a simple handheld device. It's portable, it's easy to use. It gives you the information you need. You have on the other side disposable strips, as you can see in there. What you do is, or what we do on our end, we functionalize them. We make them highly specific to the medication you want to use. So every strip which you have is specifically to the medication you're using. And what happened is you take that in your mouth, you spit on it, you put it into the reader gives you the information, and as a physicist, this is the information you can read as you see on the graph. So we measure basically some electrical properties, and this changes with the concentration. Now, you as an end user will definitely not see that. That's for me as a physicist to play a bit around, you know, and see some stuff happening. But for you as the end user, you will see a number. If you're in the therapeutic range, yes, no. And if you're not, this might be even give you a signal to the physician, so you can, or to a caregiver who can help give you assistance in order to get back to the therapeutic range. So this is what happens if we have a highly specific sensor. This is what happens if we don't make the sensor selective. You can see that it doesn't respond. So this is how we differentiate between the different medications, by making them selective. Now, we heard from the winner from last year that they're also targeting doing similar things, but optically. So the problem with optical devices, is, as you already pointed out, is that you can like miniaturize that as we have here, or using this, because optical systems are very hard to control, and you need a lot of knowledge and highly skilled properties in order to be able to use them. So in order to make technology happen, we need a great team, and we are all Stanford alums, consisting of physicians, physicists, biochemists. We have also a regulatory expert on board, and if you have seen, the majority are basically female, so we not only are from Stanford can make this technology happen, we also have a great supporting team of advisors and investors, and with your help, we'll be able to improve the quality of life for epilepsy patients.
And it seems like last year's winner is now at Stanford, too.
Thank you. We're open for questions. Yes, Jim.
I have a couple questions. Is this for monotherapy?
Oh, sorry?
What if somebody's on 4 drugs?
So we can develop different strips for different drugs, or you can even put different selectivities on one chip. This is possible.
And you can detect levels of
individual ones.
My second question is, what if somebody is in ketosis and also taking medications? Do the strips factor in ketosis?
Yes, so it's a good question. For those of you who are not in medical, ketosis would be an acidotic state with ketone bodies. So the specificity of these strips is extremely high. So it's not going to be influenced in general by ketone bodies. There are calibration procedures that can happen right on the chip that take into account acidity and other physical factors. But ketosis, although we've not tested it in ketosis, I'd be extremely surprised if ketosis affected the readout. See, this is a field effect transistor, which passes current through it, a gating current that is influenced by the charges in the vicinity of the transistor. And so if you put different charges in its vicinity, it will change its current. And by using something like an antibody to make it specific to one drug, then only when that particular drug binds will that charging current change and give you a different readout. So you can be very specific.
Marty.
So what effect does spit concentration have? And the second question I have is, have you done work showing that these levels correlate with what you'd get by standard serum testing?
Next, we can show that the one prototype is sensitive to levetiracetam levels at different concentrations. The next stage, which we have not done yet, is to develop the use protocol, which would tell the patient how to use it, just like they would for, say, glucose testing in diabetes. So, for example, you wouldn't want to do this right after you swallowed a Keppra pill, because the concentration would be high. You wouldn't want to do it probably right after you'd consumed certain foods, or if your mouth was too dry to spit. So we have, believe it or not, at Stanford, you may know this, Marty, because you're there is a saliva center, and we are collaborating with the saliva center in order to develop the protocols. But a future stage will be protocol development.
No idea. Now I can
There's a center
refer
for
my
everything.
patients to the saliva center.
Yes, you can.
He's also on our advisory board, so.
Dr. Saliva. Is that
Are there other questions? Yeah.
So how difficult is it to develop the antibodies? I suppose that's the distinguishing thing for testing each drug, or you have to make adjustments. Yeah.
So we're collaborating with a partner actually in the East Bay. They have specific antibodies for their assays, and they give it to us, and with them together we can not only like put their antibodies on our chips, but also develop new ones.
They're the same ones who supplied the Stanford clinical laboratories with the antibodies to use in their big machines. And we have as a co-founder a PhD chemist also who helps us specifically with that.
How long does it take to actually execute a measurement?
So the measurement is very fast. So basically, once you put it in, it's an electrical component. It changes immediately. It might take, so the actual signal might take to change a couple of seconds. To get the readout, we talk about maybe a couple of minutes.
Not like waiting for a pregnancy test.
No, not waiting for a pregnancy test.
Let me ask one quick question. Has this technology been used for in the industry for purification, that is to say, test levels, purifications, pollutants and things like that?
We're getting there. So technology, so I'm in this field since 10 years, and it just has been commercialized in the last 5 years.
Okay.
So there are applications coming up for things as...
Well, let me know, because that's where I'm going to put my money, too. Thank you.
I use it in like in environmental sensing, environmental line detection, you know, any kinds of sorts of things you can do with this technology.
That's my question. Thank you.
So I'm going to use the moderator's privilege to say there's a difference between sensing and getting an accurate level, and are you going to go for an actual medical device, and you know, how close is the FDA going to hold you in terms of getting it the same as in blood?
Jackie, we're going to go for a 510K. We're going to do a clinical trial which will compare the levels measured from this to free, to unbound, and to total drug levels in the serum in patients. We're going to show a proportional equivalence to the measurements in blood.
And I'm just going to throw a pitch your way, because I had a patient in the ICU that I wanted unbound phenytoin levels.
Yes.
And I waited 2 weeks, at which point I presumed that the unbound phenytoin levels probably changed.
Yes.
And the ones that I had ordered were no good to me anymore.
Well, with this, you'll wait 2 minutes.
Let me ask Bob another question, because you said you're going to do a clinical trial to demonstrate the proportionality, but have you done testing yourselves already so that you know that that it is proportional?
We've just shown. Go ahead.
There's a lot of study in the past on research papers.
Microphone.
A lot of research papers in the past have shown there's, for Keppra specifically, a one-to-one correlation between blood level and saliva levels. Now, the technology works, of course, you want to do in saliva, works only if you have good correlations, but we are talking about 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-3, something like that, wherever we know. So we know for most of the epilepsy drugs, they have a very good correlation. So this is why actually we started with Keppra. And the next thing is to show now, even for the 510K.
But my understanding from your proposal is that you have a way to measure Keppra right now, levetiracetam right now. So what's the correlation between what you are able to measure from saliva with levetiracetam and serum levetiracetam?
So this is where we're raising right now money in order to do the next step, which is what you're saying.
So you haven't done that yet?
We haven't done that
We
yet.
haven't done it.
We haven't showed it in water environment that we can detect it specifically with a high selectivity, sensitivity. The next step is now to do that in saliva correlation and get an FDA approval.
Okay. So I've been told we're running long. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I also have one other comment, and that is that I hear that people are already voting. You cannot vote before we tell you to vote, because your vote will not matter. We're resetting the vote when we start the counter. So hold those votes. You may think you already know the answer. You don't already know the answer. Hold those votes till the end. Okay, so for the next presentation, we're going to turn again to seizure detection, and this one is using a smartphone to detect seizures with Cesario. Ahmed Helmi. I want you to know, you are not the first one to bring a kid to try and turn our heartstrings. This has been tried before.
He's bringing me.
I see.
So, can we show the video, please? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ahmed Hamni.
And I'm Amir Helmi.
And we want everybody to have happy health.
Or to be health happy.
That's why we're creating
Health Appy,
a company to develop mobile health applications to improve patients' lives. Our first product is Cesario, and that's what we're here to present.
Cesario is a mobile application that detects seizures and sends automatic messages to families or caregivers in case of an emergency to get help.
This is a typical scenario where Cesario can make a difference. In our daily lives, we leave our homes and family and become subject to various accidents where we need assistance, such as falling or having dangerous seizures. Cesario was designed to detect such emergencies and contact family and caregivers with information crucial to providing help as soon as possible. Through Cesario, you can enter your emergency contacts, emails, or telephone numbers for SMS and save them. When an emergency is detected, an alert is triggered.
Emergency detected. Pick up phone and disarm Cesario alert. Pick up phone and disarm Cesario alert. Sending alert. Sending alert.
And if not disarmed within a preset time, a message is sent to your contacts containing important information on your condition or location so help can be provided. Cesario was introduced by Amir 2 years ago as a science project. Driven by a passion to help others using the latest technology, he took Cesario to school, region, and state fairs, and we hope to go international. Since then, Cesario underwent numerous refinements and significant improvements. Developed by a diverse team of energetic, enthusiastic youth, experienced mentors and experts, the latest version of Cesario was born. Did I mention enthusiastic?
The Cesario team wishes everybody to be health happy.
Oh, thank you. As you saw, can we go to the slides, please? So I'm Ahmed Helmi, and this is my co-developer, partner, and my son, Amir. And as you saw, we're here to present Cesario, a mobile app for automated detection and management of seizures. So what is Cesario? It's a mobile app to aid epileptic patients and their families improve their lives, especially in times of emergencies such as seizures or falls. So we have many different features in Cesario. The three main features we want to emphasize at this point is automatic detection of emergency scenarios using only smartphones without the need for any extra hardware. So it's a software, it's an app that goes on your smartphone. It provides also easy and immediate communication between patients and their loved ones and caregivers with crucial information when needed. It's also recording sensed data for further analysis automatically. And we can talk about other features later on. Amir will tell us about that. So why are we developing Cesario? We believe that there is a compelling need for several things in this community, including improved self-efficacy and self-management. This has been talked about before. Also to bring a peace of mind to the families of the patients, that's very important. To also reduce the response time during emergencies, and to enhance the connectivity between the patients and the caregivers and the doctors, especially for dangerous seizures that include convulsions and so on, and falls, different types of falls. There are existing approaches for epilepsy-related technologies. Many we've seen here, and we've reviewed several of them. Many, and most of them actually include custom hardware and devices. And some of them are narrow in scope, such as only for sleeping and so on. They generally have limited scaling and they're usually expensive. So we take a different approach. We try to use everyday technology and use smartphones. We looked at apps out there that are related to epilepsy. Most are simple diaries and reminders that have very limited capabilities. So we firmly believe that Cesario can indeed fill this important gap. And we utilize amazing, unprecedented technologies that we have in our smartphones today, including sensing, computation, storage, communication, and user interface, and also by providing the epilepsy community with a suite of tools to have background sensing efficiently for emergency detection and notification. So this is enabled by an elaborate architecture of software design of 5 main different components. From the bottom up, they are the sensing and detection subsystem that includes the algorithms that are actually the heart of the Cesario. They also run in the background efficiently, even when the phone is in your pocket and the screen is turned off. And when emergency is detected, the data flows upwards into the alert and the storage subsystems. And if the alert is not disarmed, it goes to the notification subsystems and the message is sent to the emergency contacts that are set up. In the middle of all of that, the user is in full control, so they have configuration of what to sense, whom to send the information to, and when to send it. And there are a lot of other features that Amir will tell us about.
So the first main feature that Cesario has to offer is the ability, is the ability to detect seizures and distinguish harmful seizures and falls from every normal day activities and send automatic alerts to pre-identified contacts. As you can see here that the seizure tracking options have been turned on, meaning seizures will be detected. And on this screenshot, emergency is suspected. In the rare case of a false positive, you can disarm the alert. Otherwise, a message will be sent. Second main feature that Cesario offers is an emergency button. With the click of a button, you have the ability to send automatic emergency messages to pre-identified contacts. Another important feature that Cesario provides is the ability to store data for later analysis. Here you can see in our home screen, you can view seizure, fall, or activity history by days, weeks, and months. We also store the data to a separate file for more elaborate viewing by doctors or experts. So where is Cesario today and where are we going tomorrow? Well, as of now, we have major functionality implemented, and we've tested the app with many different scenarios, including simulated seizures while consulting with experts. Initial tests have been very promising. While we've detected 95% of seizures and we have very little false positives, we're now supporting Android operating system, but hope to very soon expand to other operating systems. We want to enhance the algorithm to adapt to specific patients, because not all patients are the same, and we want to introduce a breadcrumbs feature that sends periodic notifications to pre-identified contacts to be able to keep families reassured. Of course, we want to expand testing with patients, and what's nice about our product is that it's an app, it's software. With the click of a button, it has the ability to expand on a global level, and that also makes it allows it to adapt to other hardware such as smart wearables. We want to thank the Epilepsy Foundation and community for being here. And here's our website where you can download the app, or you can scan the QR code to give us feedback or to be part of the Cesario project. Contact us at one of these emails. Thank you.
First, I have to say, very nicely done, and succinct. All right, open for questions.
Ahmed, thank
Who's
you.
going to beat up on the kid first?
Yes. Well, thank you for devoting your energies and your skills and intelligence to epilepsy. Really appreciate that. I have one question. You said that this has been tested with simulated seizures. Mm-hmm. And these are doctors who act out seizures, or what do you mean by that?
Well, this was first a science fair project, so I was not allowed to use real patients. But we collaborated.
Sure.
We collaborated with experts and doctors in the area, and they helped us simulate seizures so we could try to reenact out and see how efficient the app really was.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's enough to sort of say that or what do you think? What do you plan to do?
That's part of the reason we're here. We're trying to extend our hand out so we can get people to help us test out this app so we can improve more lives.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let me just add to that, because it's a very important point that the data is actually driving these algorithms. As Amir said, we consulted with neurologists in the field, and we saw videos and so on, and we simulated those seizures. We also had an 8-month-long trial of distinguishing normal to reduce false alarms and so on. But also there is the fall detection part, which we haven't elaborated on. There is the free fall, where the phone falls from your hand, but also there's the fall where somebody just falls. And we are also testing those out. And as Amir said, we're reaching out to this wonderful community, to these wonderful people. Hopefully they download the app, and some of them, if they want to volunteer their data, that would help definitely drive our algorithms. And we may even create an anonymous library that the whole community can benefit from.
One other quick question. Are there smartphones where you can wear into the shower?
There are, yeah, go ahead.
There are smartphone cases that are waterproof, and there are new smartphones that are waterproof.
Uh-huh. Shower power. Watch out.
Jackie?
Yeah.
So, no, I have two things. First of all, I'd like to offer you a job. I don't know about funding this project, but let me talk to you later. But second, so I don't wear my phone all the time. I carry it in the purse, and my son carries it in his back pocket, and I have another person at home who wears it in front pocket. So how does this all work? Because you're tied to an accelerometer in a device that is not attached to the body. It's not even a wristwatch. So how is this going to happen?
We tested the app in many different spots in the body: back pocket, front pocket, holster. And we haven't done handbag yet, but we should look into that. But since this is software, we can adapt to new outcoming technologies. As Google announced this year, and Android Wear is coming out for smart wearables, so we can adapt our program to that.
Okay, and I just want to let you know, we have a very good retirement program.
I just have one question. How old are you, really?
I'm 13.
How old?
13.
13.
Can I just add to that? Certainly, if you have the movement captured by the smartphone, that can work with an accelerometer. If you have it nearby, we can potentially tap into microphone or cameras or other things that can sense from afar. But yes, for now, as the app stands, yes, you have to wear it or be in the pocket to detect.
So with wrist smartphones, how would that work?
Oh,
Aren't some of the new smartphones
Yes.
are going to be on the wrist, correct?
Sure. So the nice thing about this is that it's algorithmic based and software which can be ported to the wearables that you have, like smart watches. I think you had the rest exactly. So if we perfect these algorithms with the data from the community, we can certainly port them to these wearables, so they can work with anything like a smartwatch, Google Glass. I think even the earpods right now, they're doing sometimes EEG or something like that, so that can also work.
One more question, then we'll move on.
Well, actually, I have two, if that's okay.
Quick.
Yeah, they'll be quick. I want to make sure I understood this correctly. So you're saying that the algorithms will evolve so that they become personalized to each individual, and so ultimately they can track the historical data and basically measure each seizure onto the next?
Right now, we've tested the app with different thresholds. So if you cross the threshold, we can identify it as a seizure. Now, with data that we're going to collect, hopefully through this community, we will see each patient, and how they will, the algorithm will adapt. So say you have weaker seizures than other patients. The algorithm will lower the threshold based on that. So let's say you have a seizure and the threshold was too high, so we didn't detect your seizure. You can go in and manually record saying, okay, you had a seizure, and then the algorithm will automatically get lowered. Or if the seizure was really, really low, that you're getting too many false positives, you can manually put that in, and the algorithm will automatically
or if you say just,
raise the threshold.
you could say you had a seizure, it will remember the movements. The next time you have a seizure, it will be very similar movements, and it will say, all right, and it continues to remember that. So then even if you don't record, or if it's a fall, you just drop your phone, it will know that it will know it's not a seizure.
Correct.
Okay.
So there are several aspects to that, I'm sorry. So one thing is that you have the ability right now to change the intensity and the different parameters hopefully in a very user-friendly way. So you can adjust the algorithms according to you manually. But if you don't want to do that, we can also have these learning algorithms that will adapt to you depending on the feedback that you get and the false positives and the false negatives and so on, and adjust not only the thresholds but also other parameters.
Okay. And then the last, sorry, one quick. You said that you might be transferring the information to doctors. Have you budgeted in the idea that you might have to get HIPAA registered or any sort of protection?
So part of the budget, I think, that we proposed was trying to cover that. Right now, it's all under the control of the user themselves, and so you have the data stored on your phone. It's not shared with anyone else.
So you're not going to put it in the cloud. It's going to be...
Right now, it's not.
When you go to a doctor, the doctor can view the files.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can either wait until you go to the doctor or wait, you can email it to them if you so choose, but
Okay.
that's configurable by the user.
Thank you so much. Okay. If you would like to be seizure happy, you will vote for this particular proposal. We have one last fish, Michael Lundell, Ketonics Breath Ketone Analyzer.
Boom. It works. Okay, can you? Wrong. That's the wrong movie. That's not the correct movie.
That's the wrong movie. Can somebody put on the right movie?
But
It's a nice movie.
Yeah, it is. We could, if we get time left, I can take that.
There will be no time left. I
Nah.
can guarantee you that.
Okay. So you can put on the presentation. Is that it? Okay. So, hi, I'm Michel Lundell, and I'm CEO of a company called M-Object Oriented Software Engineering. We're a Swedish-based company located on the beautiful west coast of Sweden, which normally looks like this. A bit like here. For the last decade, we supplied IT expertise to big pharma in Sweden, a small company called AstraZeneca. I don't know, have you heard it? But today I will talk about a new product that we developed. It's called Ketonics, and it all started 2004 with me having a seizure. A lot of tests were done, and one of the tests revealed that I had a possible brain tumor. The dream of having kids and see them grow up was lost. And many scans later, a specialist group concluded that it is an unidentified brain object, which I could live with for many years, and great. So I got a UBO and a brain. Not everybody got a documented brain. So I was happy, and I put it up in my LinkedIn profile. Fast forward to 2012, business as usual, everything was fine, and boom, I got another seizure. And the neurologist, he told me, you got epilepsy, and here's the drug. Take it and get used to it. So I took it, and one morning, 1 year later, my wife said, you changed in a bad way. So my personality changed. I was bad-tempered and stuff like that. So I looked for options. And doing that, I found the ketogenic diet, which could be an option to the drug. And I spoke to my neurologist, and he spoke with his colleagues that been doing studies of this, and he agreed it could be an option to the drug. So the switch from drug to the diet was planned in January this year. And before we did that, I had to prove that I could manage this diet. And the diet is a high-fat, low-carb, moderate protein diet. And how hard could that be? It gets my body into ketosis, which produces the ketones for my brain. And how would I know? So in the beginning, I was using urine and blood samples to see if I was in ketosis, which I found was very expensive and messy. So isn't there a better way to measure if your body is in ketosis? I made some research and found that acetone in breath could indicate ketosis, will indicate ketosis. So where do I buy a device that I can use for measuring this? I couldn't. There was none available. So being me, I set out to make my own. So I milled, I drilled, I cut, I measured, and I tested. And finally, in August 2013, I got a device that worked very well. I used it all the time, and people just wondered, what are you doing? And I explained to them, and they thought this was a good idea. You had to get it out somehow. So before I get into that, I want to explain how it works. You plug it in, and it initializes, it calibrates to the current conditions, like temperature, humidity, pressure, stuff like that. And when it gets steady blue, you exhale into it until you don't have any more air in your lungs. Then you view the result. And you can do that as many times as you want. It's very simple. So that's how the device works. You blow into it and you see if your body is in ketosis or not, or how much. So to explain how to use it, to apply it in real life, we take an example. Oh, wrong button. Lunch with a friend. Before you go to lunch at your friend's favorite diner, you measure a nice level of ketones. At the diner, you choose the most ketogenic meal you can find on the menu. It could be hard. After the nice lunch, back at the office, you measure again, and you notice that your ketosis has decreased. So what do? You adjust the ketogenic ratio of the next meal, and later on you can see that you restored your ketosis again. Lessons learned from this example is that even if you try to avoid the obvious carbs in that meal, there was some hidden, maybe in the sauce, maybe in the glaze on the steak or whatever. So don't eat there again. Will it work for others? It worked well for me. I correlated this to urine strips and blood measurements. It's not the same blood and acetone ketones, but anyway, it indicates ketosis enough. So I made some more devices, and I let experts or leading figures in the diets of paleo, low carb, high fat, and diets like that, try them. And they embraced the device and said it could help many to manage their diets for different reasons. One of them is, in Sweden at least, quite famous, and he said It's good for any number of measurements. It seems to work pretty well. And it's better than urine strips, but not quite as good as the blood measurements. And of course, it's not a blood measurement. It doesn't measure or indicate the same substance. And then from the US, there's a Jimmy Moore. He couldn't wait to share this with the rest of the world, he said. And he didn't wait. He actually showed it on an obesity conference in March this year, without asking me anyway. Anyway, they loved the device, and I decided to publish this to the world to help others that need to manage their low-carb, high-fat diets. So I put up a simple website, and I made an iPhone app, which is a ketogenic calculator, and let the app point to the website. And now the first adopters, they put out reviews, which were really, really positive. I was surprised. And now, since January, we have 600 users. And I'm getting feedback every day, and they are very happy with the device. It's a fantastic feeling to read this. So who's using it? And who would benefit from using a diet like that and a device like this? Well, we found that it's a lot of research in the effects of the ketogenic diet. It's not only for epilepsy. It's other medical conditions too, like diabetes, obesity, and other conditions. I think it could enhance the quality of life for many to use a diet like this and adjust their medication. It's also in sport. Cutting-edge athletes are using ketogenic diet to get access to the body fat, using that as fuel. In sports like triathlon, ultramarathon, marathon, biking, running, you name it. It's really cutting edge in sports now to actually leave the carbohydrates behind and get your body to use the fat. And of course, we all want to lose the love handles for the beach season. And if you want to lose your fat, you have to use it. And when the body is turning the fat into energy, it creates ketones, which ketonics will indicate. So I'm now using diet, no drugs anymore. I manage my ketosis by using this device. I enjoy the side effects like weight loss, like energy level, like endurance. And I love the feedback from all the ketonics users we have now. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. You realize you're going up against a really smart 13-year-old kid. Just saying. And I think we've given you a curveball here. It's kind of like, I don't know the right analogy, but like somebody on the Shark Tank pitching to Mark Cuban with a sports idea, because we have Jim Abrams here who runs the Charlie Foundation. So Jim, I'm going to give you the first word.
So my question is, it measures acetone. Does it measure other ketone bodies like beta-hydroxybutyrate?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it doesn't. It comes from the same source, acetoacetate, but it doesn't measure the actually beta-hydroxybutyrate. No. And that, we say BHOB, that's simpler. That could be used as energy, which acetone isn't. So the level of the blood ketones and the state of ketosis could differ, because if you need energy, the concentration of the BHOBs are going down, and the ketosis is increasing because it detects that you need more energy. So if you measure your blood ketones, it doesn't say as much as this device does about the ketosis process.
I have a few questions. What are you actually sensing? We haven't heard too much about the technology.
It is sensing gas, acetone gas.
Strictly acetone?
No, there is other things.
Is it related to breathalyzers or alcohol sensors?
Yes, sort of. Yeah.
And
You
so
shouldn't drink wine and
would
expect.
But would it measure ethanol as well as acetones?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you know how much of it is the acetone, how much of it is the?
I would say that if you have a glass of wine and then you measure your ketones, that is out of context because it's we have that in our manuals that you shouldn't drink.
Okay, and just because I know we're running out of time, this is qualitative, it's not quantitative, so you have high, medium, and low, is that correct?
We have two versions. One is low, medium, high, and one is actually 30 in a 10 divided. Each low is 10 different readings, medium is 10 different readings, and high is 10 different readings too, so you know where in the scale you are. Because if you blow 2 times and you get green and yellow, then you know you're in the borderline. But now you can see one yellow is very close to
Okay,
the
and any IP on this?
IP,
Intellectual property?
We just registered the name in Sweden.
So that's a little different than the technology, as you know.
Yeah. And the technology, it's common. We cannot take any patent on it because my friend, who is a patent engineer, he told me that, okay, do you have the money to sue anybody that tries to take your thing? And
No.
I said no, and he said, well, publish it.
Well, if you're talking about developing a company, though, and we heard from the VCs, you need some leadership and management. You need some proprietary information, which it sounds like you don't have. And I think you also need a focus. So you've talked to us about epilepsy, diabetes, obesity, and I don't know that there's necessarily a clear regulatory strategy either, right? You don't know if this functions the same in one person to the next. You say that it doesn't correlate perfectly with blood levels. So I would suggest that picking a disease state and deciding what your regulatory strategy would be a helpful step, not to monopolize the time.
Yeah. We have a strategy of developing specific devices, tapping into just focusing on, for example, diabetes use, because there are a lot of users that are having diabetes that use this, and there is always different quirks to each application, of course, but to use it to see if your diet is working, that's sort of general actually.
So of your 600 users, how many have epilepsy?
That I don't know.
Okay. Are these folks sharing their data with you?
Yes, some of them are. I encourage them. As soon as somebody is taking contact with me, I always encourage them to know why do you use it, what is your interest, and stuff like that.
Okay.
This side of the, I'm going to ask a question. Do you have any data with blood levels and with your device to show that your device and the blood level or the urine strip, or how many of them do you have?
We have done a lot of tests with, in the beginning, urine strips, and then we continued with the blood measurements, and then we noticed that the blood measurements and the acetone in breath, that could differ because the blood ketones are getting used as energy. So even if your process is working fully to produce ketones, the blood ketones could actually go down because you're using the energy.
Right. So
The
guess that
acetone
the
is not
answer
used.
But I guess the answer is they don't exactly correlate. Okay, so we don't know which one really is the truth.
I can say how I use it. I use it as a
Yeah,
compass.
I'm
No,
gonna
but
stop you.
but I will say it's. I use it as a compass. If I keep that ketosis high, I know I will have enough ketones. Whatever the blood says, I will have it in a few hours. If, for example, if I've been out running, the blood ketones will go down. But I know in a few hours the body has, created enough to get it back, or even higher. So
Okay.
you have to think a little bit. But
Okay, very good. Yeah.
Is there another question down there? Or?
Yeah, I don't see any from that side, so
So-
it's all yours.
So, you don't know whether the people who, of the 600 people, any of them are on anti-epileptic medications also?
I haven't specifically asked that. I haven't known.
So you wouldn't know, for instance, like Depakote, people who are on an anti-epileptic drug called Depakote will get false positive readings for ketones in their urine. Do you know that you wouldn't be able to answer whether that would be true in their breath also?
Any other questions? Thank you very much. So you can feel the excitement building. We're getting very close. Don't vote yet, because before you vote, I know it's a little late, but there is a reception waiting for you, and I think that there are some kinds of ketone bodies, or at least alcohol, in that reception. But before we have the vote, we are going to see what our sharks think. We're going to ask them who they're going to vote for now. And remember, what did I say before? No loan sharks. Can you say it with me? No loan sharks. So if any one of them is the only one that votes, then we're going to have a discussion up here to figure out what the final answer is going to be. So by the time we finish here, you're going to know how the sharks have voted and how that $125,000 is going to go. And then each one of you be prepared. I want one sentence why you guys should vote for me after we find out where the $125,000 is going, okay? So we'll start actually on this end.
Yeah. So I think I'm actually going to go with the saliva-based solution. I think it's a very breadth of impact. And I also know from growing up that testing can be a pain as you're growing up and your levels are constantly changing, metabolism's constantly changing. And if that solution can be applicable and impactful, it's something that I see as being a very strong solution in that area. But I'll stop taking the floor.
Okay, we got $25,000 on saliva. Dr. So.
Yes, it's a very tough decision for me between saliva or the Biostamp, but I'm going to Biostamp. And I think it has great potential, and I think the technology is there, and it will take perhaps a few more years, and they really need to push. But I wish I have a little bit. Can you give me a little bit more money so I can give it to Avails? I like the name.
Okay, so remember, you guys, wherever you are, you don't have the money yet. You don't have the money yet. We have to see whether there's a match. Okay, coming over to this side.
Well, I'm going to have to say that I was struggling with between the same two. I really like the idea of the Biostamp because I see it as a platform that can continue to develop to help different types of people with different types of problems, and it can be used efficiently and effectively as technology will continue to develop. But I think I'm going to have to put my money towards the saliva study as well, because I think that that's going to be able to provide.
We have a winner. We have a winner. There's 50,000 unless we have some changes. Okay, I can't actually say yet.
So first of all, there were a lot of really wonderful proposals, but Jackie told me to be mean, and so
You weren't supposed to tell them that, Marty.
I don't know if I can be mean, but maybe I can have tough love. And I just want to make a couple of comments. first of all, I think that for many of these projects, it's great ideas, but we don't have that much money, and it needs to go towards epilepsy goals. And some of these, I don't think homework has been done yet. So I would say that's with the MC10 product. So yeah, the technology is cool, but it's all promise, and there's not a substance there. And I would have felt a lot better if they had come to us knowing what is already available to patients and what is being developed. I wasn't even clear that the unmet need, when I say unmet need, what is unmet in the area of wearable technology and seizure detection. You're not even ready for focus groups yet. You need to find out where people have been spending their money, where the Epilepsy Therapy Project and Epilepsy Foundation have spent their money. And putting that old picture of me up there, that didn't help. Although it is 10 years old. So. And I think that the saliva testing, I think Avails is fabulous, and I did appreciate that proposal. It was very focused, it was well thought out. It's early and there's a lot of risk, but I felt there was homework being done there. The catonics, I think that's really early too, and again, it needs to think about what the focus is. I would have liked some more information about the technology. It's not helpful if we give people information that's misleading, and I don't want to support a project until we know that it's actually, have more information about whether it's going to be accurate enough to be safe to use in patients with epilepsy. The iPhone or the Android accelerometer, that's really incredible. And I would, I am so torn, but I'm going to stun everybody, and it's only because Avails was funded. And I'm going to try to give $25,000 to Shower Power, and the reason is that I have so many parents and young patients that the kid is on one side of the bathroom door and the parents are on the other and listening. Now that's a tough situation, and I believe this is doable. And you guys didn't see the proposal. It's really well lined out with milestones, go, no go, and it's doable and it's quick. And frankly, it's not the most techno sophisticated, although it's pretty good, but it's a simple, solid solution to a real problem. So that's where my vote's going, or my 25,000, I guess.
For right now.
For right now.
Okay, there's some money on the line here.
Right. So my heart was rooting for a ketonic, and I would hope that you continue your research and refine it and become more specific with it. Today, I mean, for years, all we ever heard about with a ketogenic diet was epilepsy treatment. Today, if you Google ketogenic diet, the first thing that comes up is cancer. So there's going to be a huge application for testing urine through your breath in the future. So I hope you don't give up. And then I guess where I leaned strongest after that was the WebEase. And I'll tell you why.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
It's getting exciting now.
and here's the reason. Dr. So and I were talking about this earlier today too. My experience with the epilepsy population, years ago there was a study in the Los Angeles area, and there were 40 people who answered with epilepsy who answered a questionnaire about their epilepsy. And they were from all walks of life, all different backgrounds. And the one thing everybody had in common in this study was anger. They were angry that they had epilepsy. They were angry they had no control. They were angry about the drugs. They were angry about they couldn't drive. They were angry they had 100% of the respondents in the survey talked about their anger. And what I really loved about WebEase is that it allows the patient, a teenage kid, to start to take control. So he's not, the word empowerment was mentioned several times during the presentation. And I think that's a very powerful aspect of this, of the WebEase thing, that I'm not, my life isn't totally out of my control. I can actually have some influence on my health and my well-being. And I think, then I'll shut up, but I know from teenagers who are on the ketogenic diet, and it is a difficult regimen to stick to, and it is very restrictive. But for the kids who stick with it, teenagers, there is that sense of, wow, look at me, I've taken control. I'm actually pulling this off. My epilepsy is better because of me and what I've done. And I think that's a huge area of epilepsy that we need to be thinking about.
Okay, so we now have, I'm just keeping score here, we have a match for the saliva, and we have 3 lone sharks. And repeat after me. No lone sharks. Okay, who's going to convince somebody, or do you want to change your vote, Dr. So?
Before I'm going to change my vote, and I know that Dr. Morel is not going to come along with me. She had already said enough bad things about Biostamp. So I'm going to ask Mr. Abrams if he would come along.
I just say that it's not ready for this for us right now.
I'm kidding. So maybe you call me Dr. So I'll have to call you Mr. Abrams. Can you come along with me? And if you don't, I have a tough decision to make.
He
Biostamp.
wants you to change your vote to his vote.
I understand.
I take that as a no. Whenever I invite a girl out to a party, I understand.
So I'm going to, before you do that, I'm going to ask these guys over here, like, you guys don't immediately want to change over to anything.
Well, I just think we have a wrist seizure detector that's marketed and that works really well. We have a lot of stuff that's much more mature. So maybe it's because I'm from the Valley, but you can show flexible things with little microelectronics and say, and it could do this, and it could do that, and it could do this, it could do that. There were lots of coulds. There weren't any does.
Okay. I've made a decision.
Yes.
I'm going to give my 25 to avails.
Okay.
Final. That's my second choice.
Yeah, that was my second choice also.
So let me talk. Let's talk.
Okay.
Because otherwise she's going to say, you're dead to me.
Kiss and makeup.
No, I think the WebEase is great, and I absolutely agree. The goal is laudable. All of these goals are laudable. Yeah. But the question is, what's going to be the most quickly realized, and which group can actually succeed in what they've set out to do? I am concerned that the product WebEase, I would have liked a lot more information about whether people are using that. This probably is me. I didn't even know it existed. And that's probably my ignorance, but none of my patients have talked to me about it. So I think it would have been very helpful in the presentation to understand how they were building on that strength. Secondly, they're talking about making something exciting for teenagers, but I didn't hear necessarily that there were members of the team. There's certainly great public health people, no question about it, our colleagues that I respect and admire, but where are they going to get that wow, that Hollywood factor? I didn't hear how that was going to happen. And I know that my 17-year-old has attention span of 3 seconds. So it's going to have to be really flashy. What we saw, it was a prototype, but it wasn't that flashy. So that's my only concern. I'd really like to hear more information about the team that was going to make this. Well, you're from Hollywood.
So are you going to give your money to Shower Power? Or are you going to make Dr. Morel?
So I hate to, so how many salivas do we have?
We have 3 salivas.
And 2 shower powers.
Are you giving to Shower Power?
Yeah.
Yay! Okay, but it's not over yet. We have 2 winners. We could have 3, or we could remain with 2. I want all of the groups to stand up and give me 1 sentence in order, wait, where's my order, about why the audience should give money to them. So we'll start with Shower Power. You already have some money? Where are you? You already have some money in the bank? Why, tell me, would we give you more money? What would you do with more money?
With additional support, I believe we could push the product to market even faster and make sure the focus was on safety for not only epileptic patients, but also for other groups.
But you have to start learning how to say epilepsy patients.
Sorry.
If we're going to give you any money. Okay. All right. Biostamp. You had a vote. You lost the vote. Where are you?
One especially potent shark as well. So thanks for the votes. And, you know, there was a parent yesterday on a panel who said they don't see devices being the same if they're being used for research purposes and monitoring purposes. There was a parent actually on a panel who said that as opposed to a physician. And we actually have the ability to do both, because by making something smaller, we can actually get more sensors on or make them more wearable, either way. So from that potential and really being patient-centric, I ask for your money.
Sandy.
Okay, so we have the technology, we have the team, which includes teens, to give us what we need to do to create this technology tool to empower the teens to take control and manage their epilepsy for now and into the future. And with your funding, we can do that.
And I think you're going to have a hard road to hoe, but, you know, Dr. Fisher, no, not you, Sandy. Why do you want more money?
Me?
Yeah.
We don't have a whole lot of money. We're just starting up. We don't have enough to do what we need to do,
So
for example, for the clinical trial. So that's one of my 3 points, that this is going to make a difference. We don't have, you know, big backing. We're just beating the bushes around Silicon Valley now. Secondly, supporting this idea leverages physics technology, which is already developed in another field and is really ready to be brought into the medical world, the medical community. Well, I guess I have 4 points. The third is that...
Wait, everybody else just had one sentence. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You need to sit down.
I'll sit down. All right. I heard
And
people
as
say
the
more than
person who
one.
already got money, I'm sorry, Bob. I love you, but... I said one sentence. One sentence. It was a long sentence. It was a long sentence. Okay, I think you're making a big mistake here. Send the kid. But go ahead.
He
go
told me to
ahead.
come up here. He thinks that you're not taking us seriously because he's here. I think you're making a big mistake.
No.
You should
no,
be
I don't
taking
think
us
so.
very seriously. We're very dedicated behind this. We're going to take it all the way. We're going to put all the resources. We're willing to team up with people. And I'm from University of Florida. I was with Southern California before, and we know people, neurologists there. My son is fantastic. I'm very proud of him. But this, I think we can make this in the hands of millions, literally millions of patients with a click of a button. You cannot do this with any other technology. That's why you need to back us up. Thank you.
Don't stop. Don't stop.
And, okay, ketonics. Last one. Oh, you're behind the pillar. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. We need the money to market this product that is not a paper product. It's a proven product that works. And even if it's not specifically for people having epilepsy, it works for them too. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, you all have as much information as you're ever going to have. And it is time to vote. And now, David, are you going to come up and tell us exactly how to vote? And be very careful where you touch, because you get one vote and one vote only, and you don't get to take it back. So once you've hit it, that is your vote. I'm just telling you.
Hello. So first, you have to download the application.
Hopefully they've done that already.
Yes. And then, Brian, if you can show the other slide, you have to log into the, what's it called? There's a Wi-Fi spot, a specific one for
This is
the Hyatt.
The Hyatt meeting,
Hyatt
and
meeting.
this is the Wi-Fi code.
For Hyatt meeting. And then you enter this code here, 16645-1030.
It's for the audience.
Then you get access to the Wi-Fi, and then you can use your application. Next slide.
Next slide.
Next slide, Brian. Then on your home page, below the exhibit hall, you have a you will click on Shark Tank poll. This will open up a web page where you have all of the finalists for today, and you will select you can select only one, and you can only vote once. It is not open yet. Give me just a sec. I need to go back. It's open. It's open. Okay, good.
Okay, is everybody ready? You have 90 seconds is what I understand. And in 1 or 2 of those seconds, we are going to see the live voting as it happens. I can't stand it.
That's a big gap. Yeah. It's
Now, I understand there are 51 seconds left, so if anybody wants to come up and do a dance or something, I think that those... A man walked into a bar, yeah. No, focus on your voting. And we are apparently going to cut it off before the very end so that we can announce the winner. Oh, I see some movement still. 10 seconds left. Those who haven't voted, please vote. And now we are going to show you in just a couple of seconds the winner or winners. We know we already have 2 winners of the 2014 Shark Tank competition. All of you were great. I just want to tell you, many kids have tried, but none have succeeded until now.
Well, you know what? I just also want to say, I suspect you'll be able to get into any college you want.
One final announcement. Is Andy Cole in the room? Well, with Andy, we're going to work with the American Epilepsy Society to provide scholarships for postdocs to attend this conference next year. We're hoping to provide 4 scholarships at $2,400 apiece, and I'm going to support that. I'm looking for others to join me in funding that for next year's conference. So please see me if you want to help make that happen. Thank you. Phil.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, as we break for our dinner, as the conference ends, I just want to say that the foundation is privileged to have hosted this amazing gathering. I want to take 30 seconds, if you'll indulge me. Yes, we are going to have checks coming up and check presentations if you want to see that and maybe even get an autograph or something from our winners. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you. You are our agents of change. You are the group that is going to make the difference for families, for years to come. And I'm just so proud to have been here and experienced this with you all. Warren Lammert and I know that for too long we've operated in silos, which can delay the timely development and implementation of urgently needed therapies. Coming together allows us to facilitate partnerships that bring together expertise and funding support to advance therapies. It's exactly why the Epilepsy Foundation has dedicated itself to sponsoring this unique conference. And speaking of partnerships, I have the pleasure of announcing that pending our board approval, the Epilepsy Foundation is entering into a partnership with an epilepsy biotech company in telemedics led by Jim Jacoby and Daniel Fisher and Jeff Skolnick, along with Pfizer led by Dr. Frida Lewis Hall, Ruth McKernan, and the Pfizer team to develop a precision, personalized drug delivery platform for epilepsy. The first phase of the project will involve gene sequencing, computational modeling, personalized zebrafish lines, and iPSCs from 20 patients with Dravet syndrome, and will screen thousands of novel compounds. Thank you, Jim, Daniel, Ruth, and Frida, for your ongoing commitment for people living with epilepsy. We have also been fortunate to have been asked to partner with Epilepsy and Behavior, the highly distinguished, incredible journal led by Editor-in-Chief Steve Schachter, along with Bruce Herman. And Steve, I want to thank you so much for your leadership and your partnership in bringing the Epilepsy Foundation mission forward to a community that is so vital to the success of our mission. So thank you, Steve and Jim and Daniel, for these special partnerships with the Epilepsy Foundation. As fathers, inspired by children living with the serious daily consequences of seizures and side effects and risks of epilepsy, Warren and I share a passionate sense of urgency to make a difference for our kids and for every individual and family living with occurring seizures and their too often devastating impacts. 1 in 3 of those diagnosed with epilepsy have ongoing seizures despite all available therapies, and at least 50% of people with epilepsy live with unacceptable side effects from medications. Sudden unexplained death in epilepsy, or SUDEP, and other causes of mortality from epilepsy continue to take too many lives. Our conference is a source of inspiration and hope, as well as an opportunity for the broad community to celebrate and support the work of researchers and innovators working together to make available new therapies and bring an end to seizures, their side effects, and lives lost to epilepsy. Many of you have thanked the Epilepsy Foundation in your remarks and the Epilepsy Therapy Project for the support you've received. On behalf of my board chair, Warren Lammert, our entire board of directors, and leaders from all over the country representing the Epilepsy Foundation through our affiliate network, we thank you for your steadfast commitment to individuals and families and your creativity as together we accelerate hope for an end to seizures, side effects, and lives lost to epilepsy. Thank you. And here we have some checks. So, who are we going to call up to the stage? Oh, okay, well. We're going to sign these checks and then we're going to hand them over. So, okay, Oren. Okay, can you come to the stage, please? Oh, Warren can sign. Warren, you sign. You go for it. We'll both sign. We'll both sign. Here. We'll both sign. Oh, great.
Sorry, I won't take credit cards.
Sure, here we go.
At next year's conference, we will be paying in Bitcoins.
like to see the bank's expression when you walk in with it. You want to take it with you?
No. We have one. We need two.
Oh, you want to erase it? Yes. Oh my God. You're gonna erase it.